Watch this space. This is journalism through the stars, illuminated from an oil of an olive tree, neither from the Oriental nor the Occidental. And your engagement through a like, share, and a subscribe will propel us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going before. On my mark, engage.
Engage impulse engines. Engage. Engage.
Engage.
Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage.
Engage.
Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage. Engage.
Captain. Engage emergency override.
Engage. Engage. Engage.
Engage forward shields, 35%.
Engage.
Engage the cloaking device.
Engage.
Of them. Engage them in conversation.
Engage. Engage.
Baerbock on the Lachin Corridor, and Seymour Hersh on Nord Stream with Richard Medhurst. Baerbock, Azerbaijan must immediately unblock the Lachin corridor, says News.am. Azerbaijan must immediately unblock the Lachin corridor, said German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock at a joint press conference with Armenian Foreign Minister Ararat Mirzoyan. The minister noted that the 30-year conflict has caused numerous victims. The wounds are deep, and steps have been taken recently, Baerbock observed. At the same time, she recalled that since mid-December, the online corridor linking Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia has been closed. Nagorno-Karabakh lacks medicine and food, families are separated, students cannot attend schools, and there's no energy supply. It's important to stop blocking the Lachin corridor immediately. Russia and Azerbaijan must fulfill the obligations, said Baerbock. The minister recalled the EU's decision to send a second monitoring mission to the Armenian-Azerbaijani border. According to her, representatives of Germany will take an active part in the work of the mission. As an EU representative, Germany is a neutral observer. Peace can be achieved only through negotiations. Peace can be achieved only through negotiations, Baerbock said. She welcomed the EU mediation efforts, noting that the parties are asking the question whether the peace agreement will be respected, whether the rights of the minorities will be respected. And the German minister pointed out 4 important points on the road to peace. The first is a search for bodies and their return to their relatives, a process which is being carried out by the ICRC. Second, that the international border between Armenia and Azerbaijan is not delimited, and this provokes shootings. Without a clear border, peace is far away. Germany is ready to assist in delimitation of the border. The third is demining, in which Germany is already helping. The fourth is how to help countries build peace. Germany's involvement in the South Caucasus stems from common European interests. A lasting peace will create economic benefits. Germany wants to connect South K with Europe and link the South Caucasus with Central Asia, the minister said. And from Aze Media, or AZE.media. The truth behind the Lachin Road, refuting Amnesty International's false claims. The spread of false information and propaganda by Armenians with the aim of misleading the international community and avoiding accountability for their illegal activities on the internationally recognized territories of Azerbaijan is a well-known issue. However, it's a matter of concern when esteemed international organizations such as the Amnesty International contribute to the dissemination of such misinformation. The recent publication by Amnesty International in which it falsely accuses peaceful Azerbaijani protesters of blocking the Lachin Road is a clear demonstration of its disregard for the truth and for international law. The organization's allegations are based on misinformation fed to it by Armenians, and it lacks any credibility or evidence to support them. This behavior is not only irresponsible, but it also undermines the rights of Azerbaijani citizens to protest on their own territory and engage in their legitimate demands. The recent publication by Amnesty International in which it unjustly accuses peaceful Azerbaijani protesters of blockading the Lachin Road is a clear example of irresponsible behavior. The organization's claims about the road being blocked are decisively discredited by the numerous videos that have been published on social media platforms, including my own Twitter account, which show large convoys of both ICRC and Russian peacekeeping forces using the road. These videos directly refute Amnesty International's false statement that only 5 to 6 trucks pass the road on a daily basis. Yes, we played those clips on another day. There we go. The protesters have legitimate reasons for their actions. They're raising concerns about the illegal exploitation of the Demirli and Gizilbulag deposits by Armenians, which is causing severe ecological damage in the Karabakh. The protesters also demand that Azerbaijani ecologists be granted access to these mineral deposits to monitor their condition. It's a well-established fact that the Karabakh is internationally recognized as part of Azerbaijan, and that the rights of Azerbaijanis to protest on their own soil are protected under international law. The Lachin Road was built by Azerbaijan and granted for the purpose of providing transportation for ethnic Armenians residing in Karabakh, as well as for the delivery of humanitarian cargo, not to be used for illegal activities such as export of Azerbaijan's illegally exploited natural resources. Despite the fact that dozens of huge trucks are delivering humanitarian supplies on a daily basis, there's not been a single instance of a civilian vehicle requesting to use the road. Civilians have chosen to seek the assistance of the ICRC and Russian peacekeepers instead. This fact alone undermines the propaganda of a non-existent blockade. Furthermore, the protesters have challenged Armenians and pro-Armenian journalists to provide evidence of Armenian civilians being turned away by the protesters. But to this day, no such evidence has been presented. This lack of evidence further supports the conclusion that such instances do not exist, as Armenians would certainly be quick to circulate videos of such incidents if they did occur. In light of the above, it's imperative that the organizations such as Amnesty International act in accordance with the international law and refrain from spreading false information and propaganda. Such behavior only serves to further escalate tensions and distance nations from peace and resolution. The international community must hold organizations like Amnesty International accountable for their actions and ensure that they fulfill their obligations to promote truth, justice, and peace. That's Adnan Hussein of Azerbaijan. This is also from AZE.media. Unbalanced approach casts doubt on U.S. credibility. Rather than continuing to exhibit a one-sided posture that parrots the Russian position, the U.S. must genuinely work with both Armenia and Azerbaijan in the pursuit of peace and regional stability. Imagine for a moment the backlash that United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken would have experienced if he met with Israeli leaders but not with Palestinian Authority officials during his Mideast visit this week. Naturally, he would be roundly condemned for taking an unbalanced and biased approach to diplomacy. We'll actually have more on that later, by the way. But when U.S. diplomacy in Eurasia's South Caucasus region skews toward the interests of Armenia over those of Azerbaijan, the public reaction is deafening silence. Last week, upon meeting with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Blinken said that it's important that the government and people of Israel know that America's commitment to their security remains ironclad. The following day, he told PA President Mahmoud Abbas that the Biden administration is working to strengthen our relationship with the Palestinian people and to help to improve their lives. However, America's top diplomat has made no attempt to even-handedness in his remarks on the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. On January 23rd, Blinken demanded that Azerbaijan reopen the Lachin corridor, the road connecting Armenia with Karabakh, the territory that Azerbaijan liberated in its 2020 war with the Armenians to commercial traffic. He also underscored that the risk of humanitarian crisis in the Lachin corridor undermined prospects for peace between Armenia and Azerbaijan, according to State Department spokesperson Ned Price. By contrast, in a conversation with Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan 5 days earlier, Blinken welcomed the Prime Minister's commitment to peace and made no demands of Armenia. The Israeli government understands the importance of Azerbaijan's role in Eurasia, with Defense Minister Yoav Gallant tweeting last week, following a conversation with his Azerbaijani counterparts, that deepening Israel-Azerbaijan cooperation will have a positive impact on regional peace and stability. As of late, the American foreign policy establishment has not demonstrated the same understanding. Instead, Washington's one-sided diplomatic approach has blatantly ignored the broader context surrounding the conflict in the South Caucasus. Following 3 decades of Armenian occupation in the area, Azerbaijan has, since November 2020, undertaken comprehensive efforts to rebuild Karabakh, which 4 union resolutions affirm as Azerbaijani territory. Under the Russian-brokered agreement that ended the 2020 war, Azerbaijan agreed on Armenia's rights to use the Lachin corridor solely for humanitarian purposes and commissioned a new road for Armenian residents in less than 2 years. Yet, Armenian provocations in the area have persisted. Armenians use the Lachin road to transport landmines and plant them in the territory of Azerbaijan, posing threats to the post-war reconstruction work in Karabakh, to the civilian population working in the area, and to the return of Azerbaijani internally displaced persons to peaceful life in their homes. Endless provocations and continued violence. Since the end of the war, 46 Azerbaijanis, including 35 civilians, have died in Karabakh, and 230 more have been injured from explosions of Armenian-made landmines, according to Azerbaijan's government. In November 2020, when Armenians had several weeks to withdraw from Karabakh in accordance with the Russian-brokered ceasefire following their surrender in the war, they used the time to plant difficult-to-detect explosives that have complicated Azerbaijan's redevelopment of the liberated territories. Environmental challenges have also tested Azerbaijan in its initiative to redevelop Karabakh. What had been a lush green area with vineyards, as well as a thriving wheat and cotton production prior to the Armenian occupation, was decimated by ecocide. For 3 decades, Armenian inhabitants blocked springs to divert water for military purposes. Karabakh's also typified by seemingly endless stretches of looted homes, mosques, and cemeteries, whose roofs were burnt off and whose stones were resold by Armenians in the construction businesses. Vandals also sold marble from gravestones and golden teeth from corpses, while the mosques were frequented by livestock rather than worshippers. And so in December, Azerbaijanis decided that they'd finally seen enough. After Armenians prevented Azerbaijani officials' attempt to visit areas in Karabakh that have been rife with the exploitation of natural resources, environmental activists and others from Azerbaijan have now become known as eco-protesters, took to the Lachin Road to launch demonstrations against the illegal Armenian activities in the area. Across the Western world since December 10th, Media reports and government statements surrounding the closure of the Lachin Road and the humanitarian crisis in the area have failed to acknowledge the long-time multifaceted and ongoing Armenian abuse of Karabakh. In actuality, Azerbaijan has honored its commitments from the 2020 ceasefire, including its construction of the road connecting Karabakh with Armenia, a corridor which, contrary to popular beliefs, remains open to Armenians for humanitarian purposes. One-sided actions such as Blinken's January 23rd statement serve to hinder an already fragile peace process between Azerbaijan and Armenia. Unfortunately, when it comes to the South Caucasus, such remarks from high-ranking American leaders are hardly surprising. Last September, amid an uptick in violence in the area, now former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi led a Democratic congressional delegation to Armenia without making a corresponding visit to Azerbaijan. Pelosi's delegation then proceeded to introduce a House resolution that exclusively blamed Azerbaijan for the month's hostilities, as well as the 2020 war. Moving forward, it's incumbent upon U.S. leaders and policymakers to seize the present opportunity to bring a lasting peace to the South Caucasus, and an opportunity that America's chief rival on the global stage, Russia, squandered. As a staunch ally of Armenia, Russia cannot be trusted as an honest broker in this conflict. Rather than continuing to exhibit a one-sided posture that parrots the Russian position, the U.S. must genuinely work with both Armenia and Azerbaijan in the pursuit of peace and regional stability. Otherwise, the persistence of Washington's unbalanced approach will cast doubt on the credibility of our American leadership far beyond the South Caucasus. As Jacob Kamaras. This is from Sensoru.net. Russian experts suggested bombing another neighboring country to get out of the oil crisis. In response to the oil embargo and the ceiling of Russian oil prices, Mikhail Alexandrov, a leading expert at the Center for Military Political Studies of the Moscow State Institute of International Relations, proposed launching a missile attack on Azerbaijan. He made such a statement on December 15th on the air of the propaganda resource Rusarminfo. A fragment of the commentary was published on YouTube. Russia has the means, without even starting a contact land war with Azerbaijan, to strike at Baku, completely bomb the Baku oil industry, destroy the Azerbaijani energy system, he said. Experts say that the West would suffer greatly from such strikes. Yeah, you may have to excuse the the Russian translation. Some of these phrases may be a bit broken or inaccurate, but I'll try my best to modify them. If we now bomb their oil industry, then oil will not flow to the West. This will immediately increase oil prices and conditions when they introduce a price ceiling, he said. In addition, Alexandrov accused Azerbaijan of provocation of Russian peacekeepers, referring to the unresolved conflict over Nagorno-Karabakh. A strike on the Azerbaijani energy system, he said, would also solve this problem. Azerbaijan is hiding behind, he signed a declaration of strategic alliance with us, and he provokes our peacekeepers. This is referring to Azerbaijan. We must make it clear that we may not fight in Karabakh, but we will bomb the entire energy system, the oil system, and Azerbaijan will sit without oil, without electricity, the expert said. The governments of the countries of the European Union have agreed to limit the price of Russian offshore oil in the amount of $60 per barrel on December 2nd. They were joined by the countries of the Group of Seven. Actually, I think that part was from another story. Yeah, so, and as far as Azerbaijan, here's another one. Crisis in Lachin corridor risks triggering broader war in South Caucasus. Baku thus is under pressure to lift the blockade of the Lachin corridor. In truth, Azerbaijan certainly does not want to lose its standing on the west or become involved in a broader war. As a standoff of the Lachin corridor, the primary land route into and out of the Armenian-controlled areas of Azerbaijan's Karabakh region enters its third month, the humanitarian situation there is rapidly deteriorating, prompting ever more ethnic Armenians in the region to consider leaving, while simultaneously attracting more and potentially dangerous internal attention to the problem. See EDM, January 19th, EurasiaNet, February 3rd, and Kafkas.uzel.eu, February 9th. As a result, tensions are escalating not only between Armenia and Azerbaijan, but also between these countries that generally support Yerevan and others that generally support Baku. This later division raises the possibility that any outbreak in violence between Armenia and Azerbaijan over Lachin might drag others into a broader war in the South Caucasus. See JAM News, January 6th, and EDM, January 24th. Russia, Iran, and Turkey are the three countries most immediately involved, with France, the European Union, and the United States increasingly focused on the issue of Lachin and how the standoff there could lead to renewed violence between Armenia and Azerbaijan, possibly involving other countries as well. Russia's position is by far the most complicated. On the one hand, its troops on the ground based in Armenia as well as the peacekeepers in Karabakh, the latter numbering approximately 2,500 following the 44-day war between Armenia and Azerbaijan in 2020 for a 5-year term. This force has been criticized both by Azerbaijan for violating Azerbaijani sovereignty and by Armenia for failing to protect Armenians, and some in both countries have called for the Russian forces to be withdrawn and replaced by truly international and hence genuine peacekeeping missions from other countries. But on the other hand, while the Russian government hopes to maintain good relations with both Armenia and Azerbaijan, Moscow is now focused on ensuring that it can expand its trade and military ties with Iran, and thus sees Azerbaijan as a greater problem than Armenia. One result of this is that ever more voices in the Russian capital are urging tougher stance against Baku, with one analyst from the Moscow State Institute of International Relations even encouraging Russia to bomb Azerbaijan. We covered that in the last article, forcing Baku to defer to Moscow's interests and its links with Iran. The true level of support in the Russian capital for this idea remains unclear, but the fact that such analysis was written by someone in the Russian Foreign Ministry's own training academy is telling. The two other countries most directly involved, Turkey and Iran, are far less ambiguous in their commitments, with Ankara solidly in Azerbaijan's corner as far as this and all other disputes are concerned, and Tehran backing Armenia against Azerbaijan across the border. If the Turkish position is well known, Iran is less so, even though relations between Iran and Azerbaijan have deteriorated in recent months due to Iran's military maneuvers on the border and the attack on the Azerbaijani embassy in Tehran, an attack that Russian sources perhaps significantly have taken Iran's side on. See EDM, January 31st, that Iran may have adopted the position of the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and come out in support of Armenia. It's not that surprising, but just how far Tehran may be willing to go is disturbing. At the official level, Tehran's been discussing with Yerevan the options for providing humanitarian assistance to the Armenian community in Karabakh. Armenian Sputnik, January 27th. But some in the Iranian capital are talking about taking more far-reaching moves, some of which could lead to war. For example, one recent article in an Iranian paper directed at Armenians and highlighted by Russian commentators calls for Tehran to take actions that Baku would certainly view as unfriendly and possibly downright hostile. Among other things, the article calls for Iran to step up its support for ethnic minorities in Azerbaijan, such as the Talysh, the Lezgins, and to support the movement of Islamic resistance in Azerbaijan, an Azerbaijani group that promotes an Islamist vision of the country in opposition to the secularism of the Ilham Aliyev regime. It further calls for the immediate opening of an Iranian consulate in Armenia's Sihanouk region, precisely where the Zangezur corridor between Azerbaijan proper and its non-contiguous autonomous republic Nakhchivan is supposed to pass by, as well as for expanding relations with the Republic of Georgia, and it urges that Tehran increase its public campaign against any expansion in Azerbaijani ties with the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and Israel. Again, it's uncertain how widespread such views are, but Iran's notorious for its aggressiveness and may now think it has Moscow's blessing to take more action in the Caucasus than ever before. This great involvement could potentially include the dispatch of irregular units northward if the situation in Lachin deteriorates. The West has also been drawn into the situation diplomatically and, with no military presence in the region, is thus unlikely to be drawn into direct fighting in any regional conflict. In recent weeks, Western countries have been pressing Baku to lift the blockade on the road, lest food, power, and other shortages lead to a humanitarian disaster there, and the massive outflow of ethnic Armenians from Karabakh, Eurasia.net, February 3rd. But the West's position could have the unintended result of allowing some in Moscow and Tehran to assume that they can act more aggressively, perhaps believing that the West would not take any serious actions to oppose them on Lachin. Baku thus is under pressure to lift the blockade of the Lachin corridor. In truth, Azerbaijan certainly does not want to lose its standing on the West or become involved in a broader war, but at the same time, some Azerbaijanis undoubtedly would be happy to see ethnic Armenians now living in Karabakh depart the region, and thus will favor continuing with the blockade. Even so, those who take that position should remember that Aliyev won praise for ending the 44-day war rather than allowing Azerbaijani forces to occupy all of Karabakh. He certainly could have. His decision then prevented disaster. A different decision now could have a vastly disparate and even more unfortunate outcome. That's Paul Goebel from AZE.media. Yeah, and with that, watch this space, and we'll return with more Dune World News. Iran, Russia, and China align. Dune, world news without the spin. Pepe Escobar visited Richard Medhurst's blog, and they discussed the attacks on the author of Nord Stream 2 Revelations.
Of the week, of the months, and of the millennium is Mayr report.
That was explosive. I mean, no pun intended. I keep saying it, but
literally. So, and it's wow. My inbox is exploding with people reacting to it, and some of my sources, friends, a lot of people from the US are sending stuff. I would say that 90% they say Sai is absolutely correct. There may be some problems in the narrative. It's a very complex narrative. The way it is woven, of course, there are some non sequiturs, there are some dead ends, there are some things that don't connect. But I know how Sai work. All of us foreign correspondents, we work more or less the same way. If we have a surefire source, we will build a story around what this source is telling us. And of course, we will collect extra sources and then weave our narrative. This is what Sy did this time, of course. He had an absolutely surefire source.
Yeah, he wouldn't have published it otherwise. I mean,
he would not have published it because it's a tremendous risk to publish a report like that if it's not fully backed up. And I'm sure all of us, Ray McGovern, people who worked at the CIA, we are getting returns from people that we know in Washington or that we met in Washington, and most of them are saying, yes, that's it. That's the gist of the story is there. The details it doesn't matter in the end, and it's extremely damaging because it implicates directly not only the teleprompter reader, but of course the toxic Straussian neocon neoliberal con trio, Sullivan, Blinken, and Nuland. I would say that none of us had any idea that they were so implicated in the operational details of this whole thing from the beginning. But that's apparently what it was. In terms,
that is Blinken mention number 2 of the episode. We're going to have at least a third mention, possibly a fourth.
Of how it happened, of course, Russian SVR, foreign intelligence, they had a pretty good idea. Of course, this was a state secret. There were some balloons at the time in September, and these balloons were pointing basically at MI6 and the Polish Navy, Polish divers, etc. Never the Russians mentioned Norwegians.
They didn't.
So this is something very interesting that we would have to, if we manage to have some in-depth conversations with Russian intel in Moscow or in Russia, of course, and if they would answer our questions, assuming this is not because it's still state secret.
Yeah,
they probably had information about the Norwegians, but they decided not to disclose it. So this is also very, the interest is parallel to the fact that Sy doesn't even mention MI6.
He doesn't. I was surprised because we invented this kind of sabotage.
I was very surprised about that. There must be a very serious reason. And it's not that MI6 was not part of the whole thing. Probably Sy could not 100% confirm their role in the whole operation. And of course, Sy is very meticulous. He will not print something that he doesn't have at least a lateral confirmation.
Right.
So,
I mean,
so we can trust him on that.
His past stories and accolades, the
everything,
Abu Ghraib,
everything.
It speaks for itself.
His reputation speaks for himself, and his reputation is unrivaled.
Yeah,
among all of us, foreign journalists, correspondents, etc. Sy is the holy grail of investigative journalism. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
But he said that he spent 3 months working on this story, which is a lot.
It is.
And basically, he, I don't know if he traveled to Denmark, Sweden, or Norway. I think the whole research was inside the deep state with his absolutely fabulous carnet d'adresse. He knows literally everybody, from different administrations, and for the past 50 years on top of it, So
yeah, exactly. This goes back.
So we can retrace his steps and how he built the story. So there are some serious problems. We have to talk about that. As much as we admire Sy.
What did you find was not adding up, or you found was a problem?
The fact that the CIA gets away too lightly. That's not how it works. I'm sorry. Okay, the first part, the conceptualizing, the Straussians, the meetings between State Department, National Security Council, etc.
Right.
But when it comes to the CIA and the fact that, William Burns was involved, but apparently, according to the narrative, reluctantly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not so sure about that. And obviously, Sy doesn't get into details on the real role of William Burns in the whole thing. current CIA director, who actually is one of the few CIA operatives who actually knows something about Russia.
Right, he was ambassador at one point to Russia.
He was an ambassador, so he does know something about Russia. Like now, Ray McGovern already he spoke about Burns. He said, yeah, he's competent in what he does. So considering the level of stupidity in the whole United States government at the moment, especially because of the neocons and neoliberal cons, that is like saying the guy is Wittgenstein, you know. Well, anyway. And there was something that I don't remember the exact phrasing, but this was being concocted and organized even before the Russians sent those letters to the Pentagon in December 2022,
right,
when they were asking for indivisibility of security discussions between Eastern Europe, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, and Russia. So the plot started a long... let's say after maybe in the fall of 2021.
That's how it sounds, and I wouldn't be surprised.
That's how it sounds. So that would explain, at least partially, the fact that the Americans didn't even bother to answer the Russian letters, which were extremely serious.
Yeah,
many of us published extracts of the letter, and of course, the Russian Foreign Ministry wrote extensively about the letters. Putin mentioned the letters many times in his speeches in December, then in January. So they were already their plan A was already let's blow it up. And of course, considering they are not very bright, this lot is not exactly very bright. No? The neoliberal con lot around the teleprompter leader. And obviously, they telegraphed that they were going to do. And afterwards, they telegraphed that they did it on top of it.
Newland and Blinken.
You remember that, Richard? They're not very bright.
They're not.
Blinken number 3 right there.
If you do a high-risk covert op like that, you're mum forever. That's how it works.
Yeah, exactly. Mum's the word, yeah. You don't tell anyone.
And in fact, some of my friends from Washington sent me an email today. Look, these cycles, they are doubling on a really bad hand. And every time that they double, it gets worse.
Yeah, I'm torn between, is this stupidity or is this, they're trying to be provocative on purpose? Because the funny way that Tsai kind of negotiated this was that, well, they were the CIA took this and the divers took this as a signal where Biden said we're going to, yeah, and it's so funny. It's so American, right? Like, okay, we can make it covert because now Biden said it on TV. It's so laissez-faire.
And that's one of the fragments of the narrative, Richard, which is he could have. I understand why he had to be concise, and he had to get the main aspects of how the operation was built. So I'm sure he had to sacrifice in his final editing at least half of what he originally wrote. This is what we all do. That's how it is. Unfortunately, maybe he could do a remixed greatest hits version later on. His original copy, which would be obviously fascinating.
We would love to read that. For
plenty of detail that all of us will be dying to read. In fact, but it's a pity because this accounts for some of these loops and some of these. Gasps of air, so we are trying to breathe it coming to the surface in the middle of the narrative.
Yeah.
But the narrative itself, the fact that extremely serious people in Washington, in New York, transatlantic, finance people are saying, look, that's it. Basically, the narrative stands from beginning to end with minor details. So this is very serious. And the fact, of course, that Tsai is being smeared, degraded.
Did you see this blowback from them?
Yes, I saw some
of
it.
It's ridiculous. They're saying it's fiction, and they always say this. They say this every story he does.
He's a blogger. Exactly. He has no credibility. It's a conspiracy theory. The usual shit of people who have an IQ much lower than room temperature, which is the case with all these people.
And this is Richard Medhurst's coverage on the Nord Stream blow-up.
today, absolutely explosive stuff. Again, no pun intended. How America took out the Nord Stream pipeline. Now, he published this on his Substack, right? On his independent Substack, and I'll get into why that's important in a bit, but let's go through the piece. Now, obviously, this is so extensive and so long, I can't read all of it to you. I'm going to try my best to be concise and summarize this, but I highly recommend you go and read this yourselves, because it's so insightful, and he really, you know, he creates this magnificent web of historical context and geopolitical context. And look, man, let's be honest here. What is the first thing I told you when these pipelines were sabotaged? It was either the British or the Americans. Okay, you anyone with half a brain can see that. Anyone who's honest can see that. But this is very. Why is Seymour Hersh's piece very important? Because his source is someone who had direct knowledge of the planning. Okay. Now I know people are going to say, well, it's just one unnamed source. Once again, I just listed the accolades. I just told you this guy's won a Pulitzer Prize. He's broke some of the biggest stories that I can even think of. So, you know, when he's reporting this, there's a lot of weight behind it. And the CIA and the White House are already trying to, you know, just trying to swat the story and say, oh, no, it's fiction. Yeah, well, guess what? They always say that. Again, let's go through the piece and I'll put the link below. So he starts talking about the U.S. Navy. The U.S. Navy has a diving and salvage center in Panama City, okay? This is in Florida. And why is this diving and salvage center important? Because guess what? This is where they train all the best deep sea divers in the United States Navy, okay? This is where la crème de la crème, the best of the best, gets sent, and they train them to do things like mine clearing, okay? So good things sometimes, or bad things like blowing up pipelines, right? So why is this important? Because when the Biden administration got this operation going to destroy the pipelines, Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, they ended up choosing the Navy, obviously because of their, you know, the relation they're dealing with a maritime issue and infrastructure. But the Navy, as Seymour Hersh writes here, you know, they're not under America's Special Operations Command, so whose covert operations must be reported to Congress and briefed in advance to the Senate and House leadership, okay? So the Gang of Eight. And why did they do this? This also is a measure taken to avoid leaks, okay? So here's the gang. Who gets together? Well, of course, it's Biden, it's Jake Sullivan, and Blinken, and he talks about Newland as well, and their disdain for this pipeline. Again, this is something we've gone through together extensively. I've played you so many clips, not just from these four, but also Condoleezza Rice. You know, you can pick any administration you like from the last 20 years, and you'll find people, Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter, and they're all criticizing Nord Stream for various reasons, right? So they'll say, well, you know, we don't want the Europeans to depend on Russian energy because Russia's evil. Yeah, what it's really about is making sure there's no good relationship between Russia and Europe. And of course, the benefit of that is also, you know, offloading and selling American LNG, American gas. And basically, even if you don't sell that much LNG, it's more about undercutting the Russians and screwing the Russians out of a deal. That's what it's about, okay? This is a long-term foreign policy objective. It's nothing secret. It's nothing new. These are not my words. This is Victoria Nuland. This is, you know, Condoleezza Rice. This is Biden. This is Blinken. They're all on tape saying this. They're happy that Nord Stream 2 is destroyed. They want Nord Stream 2 to be destroyed and you know, taken down. They were saying this over and over for years. So in any case, he goes through why this is such a lucrative pipeline, right? Because it lets the Russians make a ton of money, and the Germans, they get to have cheap gas. They get to grow their country, you know, and that's why, I mean, Germany has the largest economy in Europe. This is not the only reason. It's not even perhaps the main reason, but it's one of the most important reasons. Cheap gas, right? Cheap energy. And of course, they get to sell the excess gas downstream. So, you know, he also mentions former Chancellor Willy Brandt, and this is very, very important. You know, if you've studied Cold War history, you know German history, you come across Willy Brandt and Ostpolitik, which is basically the Germany's attempt to rehabilitate itself, to make up, if it can, for World War I and World War II, and try to have peaceful relations with its neighbors instead of killing each other, right? So how do you do that? This is not strictly a German idea. It's just, it was incorporated in Ostpolitik. You do that by interdependence. So you have, you build bridges, literally, but figuratively, with your former enemies. You get your economies intertwined and connected. And so there's no incentive to go to war, because if you attack your enemy, you're going to deindustrialize yourself. Right? So that's the logic behind it. So it's not just about the money. It's also about peaceful foreign policy with the, for Germany with its Russian neighbor. So they talk about Biden. This is, I really appreciate this piece for so many reasons. Obviously because of its bombshell nature, but there's so many points here that I've gone through with you time and time again. And one of them, you remember when Biden dropped the sanctions, and Seymour writes about this here. Biden suddenly dropped sanctions, right, against Nord Stream 2 because they were trying to get the Germans to stop it. And this was something that was met with a lot of surprise, for me as well. And now I joked about this a few weeks ago. We know why, right? That's why they dropped the sanctions, because they knew, okay, talking's not going to work to convince the Germans to stop this pipeline. Diplomacy is not going to work. Let's just blow it up. That's why they did it, right? And you might be thinking, well, hold on, they dropped the sanctions before the war. Why would they do that before the war? They blew up Nord Stream 2 to punish Putin for invading Ukraine. But here's the thing, man. Here's the thing. Seymour's source, okay, so Hirsch's source, who again has direct knowledge of the planning, says that they were planning this before the war started. They've been doing this for months. So in December of 2021, 2 months before the first Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine, Jake Sullivan, so that's Biden's national security advisor, convened a meeting of a newly formed task force, men and women from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the CIA, and the State and Treasury departments, okay? So these are basically the players involved in discussing what to do. So this is December. So he talks about what they were discussing, and, can they do sanctions? Can they do things that are reversible, that can be undone? Or are they going to do something that cannot be undone, like blowing up the pipelines? And over the next several meetings, the participants debated options for an attack. The Navy proposed using a newly commissioned submarine to assault the pipeline directly. The Air Force discussed dropping bombs with delayed fuses that could be set off remotely. The Central Intelligence Agency argued that whatever is done, it would have to be covert. Yes, I assume they'd say that. Everyone involved understood the stakes. Quote, "This is not kiddie stuff. If the attack were traceable to the United States, it's an act of war." So that's Hirsch's source. It's an act of war. You're damn right it is. You're damn right it is. So William Burns, head of the CIA, he quickly authorizes an agency work group whose ad hoc members included by chance someone who was familiar with the capabilities of the Navy's deep sea divers in Panama City. We go back to the salvage and diving center, right? So this deep sea diving school for the best that the Navy has to offer. And so over the next weeks, members of the CIA's working group began to craft a plan for a covert operation that would use deep sea divers to trigger an explosion along the pipeline. And he goes through here, he gives an historical example of when they used deep sea divers to unearth a cable that the Russians were using to communicate with each other. And again, it's very interesting. That's why I say you should go read it. That was, by the way, it's Ivy Bells is the operation. Hirsch continues, still the interagency group was initially skeptical of the CIA's enthusiasm for a covert deep sea attack. There were too many unanswered questions. The waters of the Baltic Seas were heavily patrolled by the Russian Navy, and there were no oil rigs that could be used as cover for a diving operation. Would the divers have to go to Estonia, right across the border from Russia's natural gas loading docks, just to train for the mission? It would be a goat fuck, the agency was told. Throughout all of this scheming, the source said, some working guys in the CIA and the State Department were saying, do not do this. It's stupid and will be a political nightmare if it comes out. That's the only, the only sense I've seen so far. So in early 2022, remember, that's before the war, the CIA working group reported back to Sullivan's interagency group. We have a way to blow up the pipelines, they said. And here, again, this is very important. he talks about those two moments that I've highlighted over and over and over again with you. When Biden is standing next to Scholz, you remember, I think it's particularly potent, not just because of what he says, but because he's standing next to Scholz. And there's this journalist who, you know, she's saying like, how are you going to block Nord Stream 2? It's a German and a Russian project. And then he says, oh, don't worry, we're you know, there will be no Nord Stream 2. I'm paraphrasing, but that's basically the message, you know. And it really shows you who's in charge, who's wearing the pants. Scholz is standing next to him like an idiot. He's not running his own country. It's Biden who's calling the shots, or let's say Uncle Sam. So Newland also says that you know, if Russia invades Ukraine one way or another, Nord Stream 2 will not move forward. I mean, again, they make it seem like it's something, you know, it's contingent upon a Russian invasion, but remember, they canceled the pipeline 2 days before the war started, and they've been planning this since December. So, you know, and like I said, for decades, they're saying we want to get rid of this thing. So does it really have anything to do with the war? Is it really only because of that? No. There are many other reasons, and the war was a good cover for them. Now, several of those, so Hirsch writes, several of those involved in planning the pipeline mission were dismayed by what they viewed as indirect references to the attack. Quote, it was like putting an atomic bomb on the ground in Tokyo and telling the Japanese that we are going to detonate it, the source said. The plan was for the options to be executed post-invasion and not advertised publicly. Biden simply didn't get it or ignored it. Biden's and Newland's indiscretion, if that is what it was, might have frustrated some of the planners, but it also created an opportunity. Now look at this logic. I love this so much. This is so American. Look at this next part. According to the source, some of the senior officials of the CIA determined that blowing up the pipeline, quote, no longer could be considered a covert option because the president just announced that we knew how to do it. The plan to blow up Nord Stream 1 and 2 was suddenly downgraded from a covert operation requiring that Congress be informed to one that was deemed as a highly classified intelligence operation with U.S. military support. Under the law, the source explained, there was no longer a legal requirement to report the operation to Congress. All they had to do now is just do it, but it still had to be secret. The Russians have superlative surveillance of the Baltic Sea. This is so goddamn American. Well, you didn't explicitly say I can't do it, so I'm gonna do it, right? So this is how they work with contracts. They'll screw you out of something. Like if you don't specifically write something down in black and white, they will just they'll wiggle out of it and just go around it. It's so American. It just over and over. You see this in treaties, you see this in agreements, you see this in contract. They're always the same crap. So it's so funny that they're doing this with their own government, right? It's like, well, we don't have to tell Congress now, right? Because Biden said on TV that there will be no Nord Stream 2. He didn't say that they're going to blow it up necessarily. He obviously made a threat. But their logic is, well, look, Biden said it on TV, so let's just go do it because now it's classified and we don't have to tell Congress. So the agency, the CIA working group members had no direct contact with the White House and were eager to find out if the president meant what he'd said. That is, if the mission was now a go. The source recalled Bill Burns comes back and says, do it. So Bill Burns, again, CIA chief. The operation. Norway was the perfect place to base the mission. Remember, these pipeline explosions, where did they happen? They happen in, well, obviously, Germany and Russia are concerned, but they happen in Sweden and Denmark's exclusive economic zones, right? Or exclusive economic areas. Their territory, basically. Norway, however, assisted the United States. So how many of you would have guessed that? Frankly, it didn't, you know, come to mind. I thought it was British and American and that's it. But it's Norway that was involved. And how? Why? Let's see. So again, Hirsch goes through the history of the Cold War, you know, why of course, the Americans like Norway. You know, it shares an enormous border with Russia, obviously. And, you know, it's a founding member of NATO. They have tons of bases there. And he even talks about how they created like some legal loophole. This is, by the way, this is not just in Norway. This has happened in other countries also, where the Americans, they get a foreign country to basically, you know, grant blanket immunity to U.S. forces that are based there. So these are U.S. citizens in the U.S. military in another country. They're stationed overseas, but they have complete immunity from prosecution. They're under U.S. jurisdiction in another country. Yeah. So obviously, you know, anyone who cares about their own country's sovereignty is not going to be happy. But that's how it is. It shows you the relationship, the subservience. So Back in Washington, planners knew that they had to go to Norway. So the source says that they hated the Russians, and the Norwegian Navy was full of superb sailors and divers who had generations of experience in highly profitable deep-sea oil and gas exploration. And here's a very important part. Here's a very important part that Hirsch outlines. The Norwegians may have had other interests as well. The destruction of Nord Stream, if the Americans could pull it off, would allow Norway to sell vastly more of its own natural gas to Europe. You starting to get the picture? Sometime in March, a few members of the team flew to Norway to meet with the Norwegian Secret Service and Navy. One of the key questions was where exactly in the Baltic Sea was the best place to plant the explosives. Nord Stream 1 and 2, each with 2 sets of pipelines, were separated much of the way by little more than a mile as they made their run to the port of Greifswald in the far northeast of Germany. The Norwegian Navy was quick to find the right spot. In the shallow waters of the Baltic Sea, a few miles off Denmark's Bornholm Island. The pipelines ran more than a mile apart along a seafloor that was only 260 feet deep. That would be well within the range of the divers who, operating from a Norwegian Alto-class minehunter, would dive, and then they would plant C4 charges on the 4 pipelines with concrete protective cover. So C4 is a widely used plastic explosive. It's very, very powerful. So here you can see the Bornholm Island. Okay, so it's magnified over here. We're talking this area. I don't know how well you can see that, but it's really close to the pipelines. Yep. After a bit of research, Hirsch writes, the Americans were all in. At this point, the Navy's obscure deep diving group in Panama City once again came into play. So he says that the best divers with deep diving qualifications are a tight community, and only the very best are recruited for the operation and told to be prepared to be summoned to the CIA in Washington. So now they talk about, well, you know, how are they going to pull this off? Because, okay, this is physically speaking, off of Bornholm, this is the right place to do it. You know, it's not too deep for the divers. The current is not that strong, so it's not too risky. But what about covering it up? How do you pull it off without the Russians noticing? Because obviously, you know, the Russians, they have very good surveillance. There's a lot of maritime traffic in the area. So how do you get in and get out without the Russians noticing? And here's where the Norwegians, they propose an idea as well, right? So the Norwegians said that they should use Balt Ops. So Balt Ops is basically Baltic operations. So it refers to a NATO exercise that they've been doing for 2 decades in the Baltic Sea every year in June, right? And the Norwegians proposed this would be the ideal cover to plant the mines. And I want to tell you something, because when Nord Stream and 1 and 2 were sabotaged, do you guys remember what I showed you? I showed you a couple of things. One of them was the Royal Navy, the British Royal Navy, doing exercises in the Baltic Sea. And I also showed you this. I talked about Balt Ops, about NATO doing these training exercises. And there was also talk of how they were using these UUVs. So, you know, as opposed to a drone in the sky, an unmanned aerial vehicle, these were unmanned underwater vehicles, right? So the funny thing is that they were even writing this crap on their own websites, right? Like that's what's so funny. And interestingly enough, Seymour, he links to the same thing that I showed you. This is on the Navy's own website, U.S. Navy. So they're you know, they're talking about how Balt Ops was a perfect opportunity for research and testing new technology. And here they talk about the unmanned underwater vehicles, right? So we looked at this right here on the day that the pipelines were sabotaged. And turns out this was the dam cover. This is exactly when they did it, when they went down and put the charges. They did this in June. Okay, so they did this 3 months before blowing up the pipelines. 3 months they waited. Yeah. 3 months. So Hirsch continues, it was both a useful exercise and ingenious cover. The Panama City boys would do their thing, and the C4 explosives would be in place by the end of Balt Ops 22 with a 48-hour timer attached. All of the Americans and Norwegians would be long gone by the first explosion. The days were counting down, and the source says that the clock was ticking and we were nearing mission accomplished. And then Washington had second thoughts. What? The bombs would still be planted during ball drops, but the White House worried that a 2-day window for their detonation would be too close to the end of the exercise, and it would be obvious that America had been involved. Well, you waited 3 months and it was obvious you were involved, so, you know, I don't know if that made much of a difference, but... Instead, the White House had a new request, Hirsch continues. Can the guys in the field come up with some way to blow the pipelines later on command? Some members of the planning team were angered and frustrated by the president's seeming indecision. The Panama City divers had repeatedly practiced planting the C4 on pipelines as they would during ball tops, but now the team in Norway had to come up with a way to give Biden what he wanted, the ability to issue a successful execution order at a time of his choosing. So again, he draws some great examples here of how, you know, during the Vietnam War, Johnson and the CIA, you know, they serve it at his pleasure. And this is kind of the same thing where the CIA is just doing everything it can to serve Biden's pleasure, right? Or Newland's pleasure, whatever you like. So here's how they did this, okay? Are you interested to know how they did this? How they activated the bombs, how they detonated them? So the C4 attached to the pipelines would be triggered by a sonar buoy dropped by a plane on short notice, okay? So basically, this is something they would drop from a plane, and it would issue a very specific, I don't know, it's like a sequence of tones, basically, right? But they have to be unique, because remember, you're talking about the Baltic Sea. So, you know, you've got the underwater sounds, the sea life, you've got the maritime traffic, you have the radio noise and all sorts of other interference. So you don't want something accidentally activating these bombs. It has to be very, very specific. And the longer you wait, obviously, the higher the risk that something, just by chance, just by coincidence, you know, makes this exact sequence or something close enough to detonate the bomb. So, you know, they were worried about this. This is what he explains in the article. So once in place, the delay timing devices attached to any one of the 4 pipelines could be accidentally triggered by the complex mix of ocean background noises throughout the heavily trafficked Baltic Sea, from near and distant ships, underwater drilling, seismic events, waves, and even sea creatures. So to avoid this device would emit a sequence of unique low-frequency tonal sounds, much like those emitted by a flute or a piano, that would be recognized by the timing device, and after a preset hours of delay, then trigger the explosives. Okay, so there's a plane, drop the device, make the sound, and then after a few hours, boom. That's what they did. That's how they blew up Nord Stream 2. So this is Dr. Theodore Postel. So he's a professor at MIT. And he says, quote, you want a signal that is robust enough so that no other signal could accidentally send a pulse that detonated the explosive. So he used to work with the Pentagon. Okay? And here we go. On September 26th, 2022, a Norwegian Navy P-8 surveillance plane made a seemingly routine flight and dropped a sonar buoy. The signal spread underwater, initially to Nord Stream 2 and then onto Nord Stream 1. And a few hours later, the high-powered C4 explosives were triggered and 3 of the 4 pipelines were put out of commission. Within a few minutes, pools of methane gas that remained in the shuttered pipelines could be seen spreading on the water surface, and the world learned that something irreversible had taken place. So here he goes into the hysteria, like, you know, oh, this was Russia, right? The New York Times wrote, this was Russia. Was it? Yeah, it must have been Russia, right? Because, you know, it's very rational for someone or a country to invest billions of dollars and then just blow up something for, you know, especially when it's not even using it. There's no more gas going through. You know, one minute, oh, Putin is not giving us gas. He's trying to starve Europe and, you know, freeze Europe. And then, oh, he blew up his pipeline as well, where no gas was coming through. And he goes about, again, what did we have? Very, you know, very potent statements, gloating, just straight up gloating from Secretary of State Blinken, from Undersecretary of Political Affairs Victoria. And you guys remember, this is just last week where Victoria Nuland is saying that she's happy, like Ted Cruz, she's happy that Nord Stream 2 is nothing but a what is it, a hunk of scrap metal at the bottom of the ocean or something like that? Yeah, a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea. She's so happy. And then what did Blinken say? He said, oh, it's a tremendous opportunity Yeah, I bet it is. For you in Norway. You gotta sell that gas, right? You gotta sell that gas.
Blinken number 4. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Good point to switch modes there. Yeah, I really appreciate the coverage here.
So Hirsch's source,
Medhurst, wherein he you can see the proverbial breadcrumbs that have been collected on the way towards Hirsch's story. You know, Medhurst clearly documented or journaled them, which is, you know, that's really special. Make sure you head over to his page and thank him for that. And you know, engagement is important. Your engagement through a like, share, and a subscribe will propel us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been gone before. On my mark, engage. Iran, Russia, and China align. We have a few stories on that. Iran, Russia resisting swift hegemony over banks. This is Al Mayadeen English. According to Mohsen Karimi, all Russian banks nationally and abroad have access to SPFS, and 106 foreign banks in 13 other countries are now connected to CPAM. A woman used an ATM machine at a branch of the bank Meli Iran at the Grand Bazaar of Tehran in Iran. An Iranian official announced that all banks in Russia and more than 100 banks in numerous other nations have been linked to CPAM, Iran's financial communication system dispensing of SWIFT, which had hitherto monopolized financial telecommunication. The Central Bank of Iran's deputy governor for international relations told the Iranian news agency Tasnim that Iranian banks are now no longer required to use SWIFT for financial transactions. According to Mohsen Karimi, all Russian banks, nationally and abroad, have access to SPFS, the Russian version of the SWIFT financial transfer system, and 106 foreign banks in 13 other countries are now connected to CPAM, Iran's local interbank telecom system. Since the Russian SPFS has been linked with Iran's CPAM, anyone with access to the Russian network can now connect with Iranian banks and vice versa. Karimi clarified that SWIFT standards are the foundation upon which messages between CPAM and SPFS are sent. Rustam Ziganshin, the Russian trade representative in Iran, presented plans for the establishment of a SWIFT-like bank-to-bank information and payment system. Last February, Russian banks were excluded from the SWIFT interbank payment system by the decision of the European Commission and its allies. The maneuver was intended to hit the country's banking network and access to funds via SWIFT, which is pivotal for the smooth transaction of money worldwide. This type of solution already exists, particularly in China. The country launched its international interbank payment system in 2015 called CIPS. I covered that yesterday. And here's a little bit more about Raisi's China visit. Pro-government media outlets in Iran are talking up President Raisi's landmark trip to China. The 3-day visit comes as the Islamic Republic hopes to enhance relations in line with its Look to the East doctrine. Yet the much-touted 25-year strategic cooperation agreement between the two nations has yet to be implemented on the scale its supporters had seemingly been expecting. Meanwhile, hours before Raisi was due to leave for Beijing, Iran's Guardian Council announced that the legal process of joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization has been formally completed. The coverage. The Chinese Foreign Ministry announced on February 12th that Raisi would be in China on February 14 through 16. Reza Zabib, director of the Asia and Oceania Department at the Iranian Foreign Ministry, said that Raisi's trip would mark the first state visit to China by an Iranian president in 2 decades. People's Daily, the Chinese Communication Party's official newspaper, published an article by Raisi on February 13th in which the Iranian president said, "Tehran will always pursue the policy of strengthening bilateral relations." Raisi, who discussed his trip with Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei before leaving Tehran on February 13th, seeks to enhance relations and oversee the signing of several agreements during the visit. Mohammad Jamshidi, Raisi's deputy chief of staff for political affairs, said on February 12th that implementing the 25-year strategic partnership deal signed with China in 2021 is among the president's main goals. Majid Reza Hariri, president of the Iran-China Chamber of Commerce, told Chinese media on February 13th that Tehran and Beijing plan to sign agreements worth more than $10 billion. See, we have a graph here, China-Iran trade 2012 to 2021, total trade in brown, China's imports from Iran in blue, and China's exports to Iran in yellow-orange. You can see a general decrease, but slight and gradual. Conservative media supportive of the Raisi administration have been talking up his trip to China and praising its political outcomes. The government-run Iran Daily on February 13th said the purpose of the visit was to neutralize sanctions and mark the occasion by publishing a 120-page extra on the Islamic Republic's trade ties with Asia's top economy. While I was reading that, I was thinking Amwaj.media is the name of the site. Tasnim news agency, which is affiliated with the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, argued that strengthening relations with China would help protect Iran's economy from the nature of ties with Western nations. The context analysis. Hit by Western extraterritorial sanctions, Iran's come to increasingly rely on China as the main customer of its crude exports. Notably, Iran's oil sales reportedly hit new highs in November and December 2022, driven by more shipments to China and Venezuela. Moreover, Iran and China signed a long-term strategic roadmap in March 2021, which Tehran in January 2022 said was being implemented. However, the two nations have been seemingly sluggish in implementing the roadmap, with one of Raisi's main goals being to expand collaboration. The roadmap's not without its detractors. It's drawn ire at home over concerns about over-reliance on China and due to perceived secrecy surrounding the document. Notably, politicians from across the political spectrum in Iran have defended keeping the details of the document under wraps. Raisi's trip comes nearly 2 months after a backlash in Iran over a joint Arab-Chinese statement issued during Chinese President Xi Jinping's high-profile visit to Saudi Arabia in December 2022. China sought to allay Iranian concerns by sending a delegation led by Vice Premier Hu Chanhua days later, during which the two sides agreed to enhance trade and implement joint projects reportedly worth tens of billions of dollars. While Raisi's visit is his first official trip to China, he's previously met with Xi. The two presidents met in September 2022 on the sidelines of Shanghai Cooperation Organization summit in the Uzbek city of Samarkand. Importantly, the president on February 7th formally signed into law a bill approving Iran's ascension to the SCO. Hours before Raisi was due to leave for Beijing, the Guardian Council announced that the legal process of joining the SCO had been formally completed. Iran has for years sought to join the Eurasian bloc, but has been blocked by Western sanctions. Tehran's accession to the SCO would therefore be a major political win for Raisi. Iran and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Tehran's long-standing quest to join the Eurasian bloc, appears to finally be coming to fruition. The future. Consolidating relations with China is important to Iran, particularly since the deadlock over the revival of the 2015 nuclear deal remains. Enhancing ties with China is in line with the Islamic Republic's look to the East policy, which is espoused by Khamenei. However, given the sluggish implementation of the 25-year roadmap, there is no guarantee that Raisi's trip will have game-changing outcomes, even if major agreements are linked. That's omwatch.media. Saudi Arabia eager to join SCO, BRICS, Russian diplomat. The Gulf nations' membership in the SCO is being actively discussed, while the idea of joining BRICS is under consideration. And this is something we'll save for another time. This is it is related, but it's a little less related than I think I want this section to be. So, want you to watch this space and remember that your engagement through a like, a share, and or I would like all three. It would be nice to have all three, the like, the share, and the subscribe. But if you had to choose one, I'm not sure which one you would choose. I just know that it would be okay if you did. Like, share, and a subscribe. But giving that like, share, and subscribe will propel us at warp speed towards the continuation of our mission to truthfully go where no news will have been going. Watch this space. More news. Al-Aqsa news. From Al-Aqsa to all. The Israel guy Justin Hilton unsure about the two-state solution. Here's a clip.
Defense missions to, say, take out Hamas rocket posts in Gaza or to take out terrorists in Jenin. This is all in self-defense. They're not escalating any violence. So there are not two sides here. One side needs to de-escalate this violence. And also about the two-state solution. I'm not sure whether this is ignorance or I think he knows what he is talking about. I think he knows that a two-state solution will never, ever work here in Israel. It is absolutely, it would be absolutely suicidal.
And let's put this a bit into context. I stumbled upon this page years ago. Justin had the same opinion he has here, and this was posted 10 days ago. And this group of vloggers, if I'm not mistaken, they live in Israel, and so they would probably be considered right-wing Israelis. I'm not sure if they would consider themselves far right, but I'm sure they would consider themselves right-wing. And so this is the general take on the two-state solution for people in their position. I think they represent the majority or the common opinion on this. And here's a bit more.
Idol for the people of Israel, for Judea and Samaria. Guys, just look what happened in Gaza when Israel gave up Gaza. It was a very peaceful place, and then the Palestinian terrorists, they took it over and they turned it into rockets raining onto Israel. And that's exactly what would happen if Israel gave up Judea and Samaria, except for it would be way, way worse. I think maybe the most maddening part of this, he knows that they're not two sides having any violence. They're not out Hamas. This is one side needs, whether this is ignorance, this violence, and also about the two-state solution. I'm not sure whether this is ignorance or I think he knows what he is talking about. I think he knows that a two-state solution will never, ever.
By he's referring to Anthony Blinken.
Was what he is talking about. I think he knows that a two-state solution will never, ever work here in Israel. It is absolutely, it would be absolutely suicidal for the people of Israel, for Judea and Samaria. Guys, just look what happened in Gaza when Israel gave up Gaza. It was a very peaceful place, and then the
Well, there are a few people who might disagree with the idea that a two-state solution, particularly a few governments, one being Palestine, the other being the United States. And I'm not sure about whether or not it's the official position of Israel, but I would doubt that it is. So the United States and Palestine, for example, the Palestinian president says to seek UN resolution to protect two-state solution. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas said Sunday Palestine will seek a UN Security Council resolution to protect the two-state solution. Addressing a conference hosted by the Arab League in the Egyptian capital Cairo and providing support to the city of Jerusalem, Abbas called on Israel to abide UN resolutions and signed agreements with the Palestinians. We will go to the United Nations and its different agencies, including the Security Council, to counter the Israeli practices that violated all of red lines, Abbas said. We'll demand the issuance of a resolution for protecting the two-state solution by granting Palestine full UN membership and halting Israel's unilateral actions, atop of which is the settlement building. He added, we will call for abidance by the signed agreements and UN resolutions, and for holding an international peace conference, he added. The Palestinian leader went on to call for Arab and Islamic support to the Palestinians in the city of Jerusalem. Supporting Jerusalem and strengthening the steadfastness of those staying there and in its environs is a religious duty and a humanitarian and national imperative, he added. Sunday's conference was endorsed by the last Arab Summit, which was hosted by Algeria in November. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and Jordanian King Abdullah II are taking part in the meeting along with representatives of international and UN agencies. Jerusalem remains at the heart of the Israel-Palestine conflict, with Palestinians hoping that East Jerusalem, now occupied by Israel, might eventually serve as the capital of Palestine. And here's Anthony Blinken on the matter.
Good afternoon. So we've had a busy few days at a pivotal time for the region. The United States is determined to work with our partners to foster a more stable, secure, and prosperous Middle East. The horrific terrorist attacks in Jerusalem, the escalation of violence in the West Bank, will underscore the significant challenges to security and stability that the region faces and that we face. We began this trip in Cairo, where I met with President Sisi and Foreign Minister Shukri, as well as with Egyptian human rights defenders and young leaders. Among a wide range of issues in my meetings with the government, we discussed the role Egypt and other neighbors can play in helping Israel and the Palestinians de-escalate, reduce tensions, and lay the foundation for a more peaceful path. Upon arriving in Israel, I expressed my condolences and those of the American people to Israel and to the families of the 7 civilians who were killed in the horrific terror. People. Upon arriving in Israel, I expressed my condolences and those of the American people.
Yeah, I wanted to hear that one again as well. There's this idea that I think his name is Justin, was propagating from the Israel guys that Blinken was partial to Palestine. If you guys agree with that, I think let's go back a bit.
Palestine, and sadly 7 were killed in this. May the memory of your Yaakov. Many more were wounded. Most mentioned the fact that they're completely different, that it was authority that they've both sustained, Palestinians and Israelis that have both been killed. He quite frankly, outrageous. And then later on, he held several press conferences. The last one, our most heartfelt condolences, knowing that we can never know the depth of your loss. May the memory of your loved ones after he said attack, praying terrorist open terror attack on Friday. Blinken had. So, for the past few days, the U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has been in Israel. When he first arrived, I believe it was January 28th. When he came in, he met with the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. He started off great. He, first of all, expressed his condolences for the victims of the terror attack on Friday night. As you guys know, there was a horrific terror attack on Friday night when a Palestinian Arab terrorist opened fire on worshippers outside of a synagogue that were praying, and sadly 7 were killed. Condolences condemned the attack. He said, quote, 7 people were killed in Friday's terrorist attack in Neve Yaakov. Many more were wounded. Most were leaving a synagogue after prayer. To the families of the victims, we express our most heartfelt condolences, knowing that we can never know the depth of your loss. May the memory. Later on, he held several press conferences, the last one being on Tuesday. And at this press conference, he made some statements that were, quite frankly, outrageous. He compared the casualties, Israel and the Palestinian Authority, that they've both sustained, Palestinians and Israelis that have both been killed. He said that both sides have lost many lives. He compared them, he said, basically.
So his issue is the equivocation. His issue is the problem. I mean, I get what he's saying within the context of the synagogue shooting. There shouldn't be equivocation, but within the context of the two-state solution, there should be equivocation. Within the context of humanity, there should be equivocation. So, but this is yeah. Well, I want to make sure
on the same.
I want to make sure you're clear on the sentiment that he has for. Like Blinken.
Israelis have died, Palestinians have died. He didn't mention the fact that they're completely different, that it was 7 innocent Israelis who were killed and then terrorists that were being taken out by the IDF.
Yeah, that's how he equivocates it, or that's the reason why he doesn't equivocate it, is because there were 7 innocent people and then there were terrorists.
He's basically joining what the mainstream media have been saying about this all along. Go watch the show from yesterday where Luke talked about the lies that the media was putting forth about this story. So basically, Antony Blinken, he's joining the bandwagon of blaming Israel, basically, and trying to compare the losses of the Palestinians and Israelis when there's absolutely no comparison at all.
Well, let's see. Let's see if he's blaming Israel.
To Israel and to the families of the 7 civilians who were killed in the horrific terrorist attack outside a synagogue in Neve Yaakov. In the wake of this and the subsequent attack on an Israeli father and son, I reaffirm to Israel and its people the United States' ironclad commitment to Israel's security. A rising tide of violence has resulted in the loss of many innocent lives on both sides. As I discussed with Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Abbas, and everyone I met in Israel and the West Bank visit, all sides must take steps to prevent further escalation in violence and restore calm. That's the only way that we can create conditions in which people's sense of security will start to improve and fear can start to recede. Across my meetings with Israel's government, the Palestinian Authority, our partners in Cairo, I heard a deep concern about the current trajectory. But I also heard constructive ideas for practical steps that each side can take to lower the temperature, to foster greater cooperation, to bolster people's security. And so I've asked senior members of my team to stay on in the region and continue discussions on how these steps might actually be advanced. These are the steps that the parties themselves must lead on. And we have no illusions that heightened tensions can be diffused overnight. But we're prepared to support efforts here and with partners in the region if the parties have the will to do so. The United States is always ready and willing to be a partner in the cause of peace and security. On my return home and in the coming days, I'll also continue to engage with partners in the broader region who share our serious concerns about the escalating cycle of violence, and like us, want to support the parties in finding a way forward. So restoring calm is our immediate task, but over the longer term, we have to do more than just lower tensions. The United States is committed to working toward our enduring goal of ensuring that Palestinians and Israelis enjoy equal measures of freedom, security, opportunity, justice, and dignity. And it's President Biden's firm conviction that the only way to achieve that goal is through preserving and then realizing the vision of 2 states for 2 peoples. The United States will continue to oppose anything that puts that goal further from reach, including, but not limited to, settlement expansion, legalization of illegal outposts, move towards annexation of the West Bank, disruption to the historic status quo on Jerusalem's holy sites, demolitions and evictions, and incitement and acquiescence to violence. We will also support all efforts to move us closer to peace, expand a horizon of hope, advance equal rights and opportunities for Palestinians and Israelis. That includes building on the efforts that we've made over the past 2 years to improve the lives of the Palestinian people in concrete ways. We bolstered our assistance to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees, UNRWA, including approximately $50 million in new funding that I announced today in Ramallah.
So where's the talk of Israeli refugees, right? Yeah, I think the Israel guys are correct. You know that in saying that Blinken is equivocating, with his words. But what about his actions? What about the U.S. Government's actions? Is there talk of Israeli refugees? Is that even a thing? Or even beyond that, the amount of support that Israel receives, does Palestine receive the same amount of support?
Enabling the provision of essential services like food, vaccines, education, as well as vital aid for refugees. That brings U.S. total funding for Palestinians over the last 2 years to nearly $940 million. We're supporting quality health care through the East Jerusalem Hospital. And we're making real progress toward implementing an agreement to provide a 4G network in the Palestinian territory.
Okay, so we do have a number, $940 million.
These are facts, they're numbers. You can these are facts. These are facts. They're numbers. You can
We have the evidence. No one can dispute the evidence. We heard the evidence. We saw the evidence.
We'll take that into account and log that in our data and discuss maybe later how that compares to Israel foreign aid from the United States.
We're also working to broaden and deepen the circle of peace between Israel and its neighbors. As we demonstrated earlier this month when U.S. officials joined representatives from Israel, Bahrain, Egypt, Morocco, the United Arab Emirates for the first meeting of the Negev Forum working groups. Again, this was the largest assemblage of officials from Arab countries and Israel since Madrid, going back many decades. On crucial issues like food and water security, clean energy, regional security, our efforts are creating collaboration that will improve the lives and livelihoods of people across the region and erode long-standing biases and distrust. Even as we're making real strides toward expanding peace with Israel's neighbors, we continue to work together to tackle shared threats. This morning, Minister of Defense Gallant and I discussed ways to deepen our cooperation to confront and counter the Iranian regime's destabilizing actions in the region and beyond. I also met with opposition leader Lapid, who shares the same commitment to counter Iran. Tehran's deepening ties with Moscow and the sophisticated weaponry that they're exchanging to enable one another's aggression are among the many reasons that we raise with Israel the importance of providing support for all of Ukraine's needs, humanitarian, economic, and security, as it defends its people against Russia's brutal war of aggression. We discussed a number of ways to advance the United States and Israel's shared security interests, just as I did yesterday in my meetings with the Prime Minister, with President Herzog, and with Foreign Minister Cohen. Across these discussions, I made clear that America's commitment to Israel's security is unwavering, just as it has been for nearly 75 years. Finally, the United States will continue to deepen our bonds here with partners outside of government. Today I had the opportunity to spend time with Palestinian and Palestinian-American civil society leaders, entrepreneurs, business owners in Dar Debwan, who shared the vital work they're doing to improve the lives of their communities. And I started my day by hearing from a group of young Israeli leaders, Jews and Arabs, who are doing inspiring and critical work, from advancing LGBTQ rights and the rights of people with disabilities to building trust and ties between communities. These meetings were a reminder that the civil society in both of our countries plays an indispensable role in defending and strengthening the rights of people and principles at the heart of a free and open society, and helping people tackle some of their most pressing challenges. It's a reminder of how citizens are willing to continue to engage, to hold their leaders accountable, and to keep working to create the world that they and their communities want. They can count on the United States and a partner in all of those endeavors. With that, I'm happy to take some questions.
We'll start with Tracy Wilkinson of the LA Times.
Hi.
Tracy.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for taking this time, because I have had a couple of very busy days. We can all bear witness. You just mentioned the deep concern over the trajectory that you saw here. And in your meetings, both with Israeli officials and people and Palestinian officials and people, I wanted to dig a little deeper into that. Do you concur with, or at least understand, Israelis who fear that some of the actions of their new government threaten democracy here? And after meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu, do you believe that he can and wants to preserve democracy? And on the Palestinian side, Palestinians are increasingly disillusioned with the two-state solution. Many have given up on it, convinced that Israel will never let it happen.
See, this is exactly it. You know, this is the narrative, that Palestinians are disillusioned with it. But we also get proof, and then I think the next thing that she says is that Israel will never let it happen as well.
Palestinians are increasingly disillusioned with the two-state solution. Many have given up on it, convinced that Israel will never let it happen. Yet you continue to advocate it, as you just did a minute ago. After meeting with President Abbas, do you think he is the person to resolve the statehood
me take the second part of the question first and then come to the first part. Look, as always, we're focused on the policies that governments, administrations pursue, not individual personalities. And so we're focused on what the Palestinian Authority is doing, both to work to improve the lives of the Palestinian people, as well as to engage responsibly with Israel on, first and foremost, diffusing the current situation, the current cycle of violence, reducing tensions, not escalating them, calming things down, not ramping things up. That is the immediate focus. And heard both from Palestinians, including President Abbas, as well as from Israelis, some ideas for how we can move that forward, which is why I asked some of my colleagues to stay behind to support the efforts that are being made to calm things down. That's really the first order of business. And my hope is that if that succeeds, then we can look to both sides to take some positive steps to try to rebuild confidence, rebuild trust, and that in turn lays the foundation for, at some point, pursuing two states. But I think in this moment, the most immediate challenge is, as I said, diffusing the cycle of violence that has people here first and foremost, but around the region, deeply concerned. As I said, the President Biden remains committed to and convinced of the importance of a two-state solution, but one step at a time. We have to focus first on making sure that Israelis and Palestinians diffuse the current situation, and then start to build some positive steps into their relationship. With regard to the first part of the question, and I think you heard me address this yesterday, the relationship that we have with Israel is based fundamentally on shared interests and shared values, and it's been that way for 75 years. I spoke about some of those values yesterday.
So there we are. I mean, this portion of it, here's what we'll say. Mohammed, help me out with this one.
Your inconsistencies are glaringly obvious.
Your inconsistencies are glaringly obvious. Well, you just spoke of Palestine. Now listen to the way. It's a two-state solution, correct?
Including, of course, respect for human rights, equal justice under the law, equal rights for all, the rule of law, free press, a robust civil society. And as I mentioned, I had an opportunity to engage with some representatives of civil society just today. And to be sure, Israel has a very robust civil society, and we've seen that in recent days. And again, I saw that today in my own meetings. With regard to the proposed reforms, there's clearly a very vibrant debate that's going on, a discussion that's going on in Israel, and these debates are a very healthy part of a vibrant democracy. In fact, they're unique to democracies. And as democracies, one of the things that we recognize is that building consensus on new proposals is the best way to make sure that not only are they embraced, but that they actually endure. All of this, of course, is for Israelis themselves to work out, but we look forward, generally speaking, to working with Israel to advance the interests and values that have been at the heart of this relationship, as I said, for 75 years.
Geely Cohen of Con News.
Thank you, Secretary, for doing this. Following the legislative reform, several members of the Israeli coalition, including one minister, has said after their comments yesterday with Prime Minister Netanyahu that the Israeli Prime Minister doesn't need a lesson in democracy. I wonder what you think about such comments, and also, Secretary, did you receive any assurance from Netanyahu about how you're going to implement this plan? And another question regarding the escalation. Prime Minister's office announced after the terror attack that they will promote steps to strengthen the settlements and even increase the number of guns held by citizens. Do you think that this might contribute to another escalation?
Two things. What I talked about yesterday, and again talked about just now, reflects the shared values that the United States and Israel have had and held for more than 75 years. And it is nothing more and nothing less. I continue to be inspired by the vibrancy with which Israel shares those values, something that, again, we're seeing right now. And I think I can say the same thing about my own country, the United States.
What is this nothing you talk about? What is this nothing you talk
With regard to
about?
the second part of your question, we have been clear and consistent in our conviction that neither side should take any unilateral actions that right now potentially would add fuel to a fire, and over the medium to long term would make the prospects of achieving two states even more distant than they currently are.
Will Malden, Wall Street Journal.
Thank you so much for doing this. I wanted to ask in your meetings with Prime Minister Netanyahu and Defense Minister Gallant if any new issues of overlap came up in the issue of Iran, any new ideas for U.S. policy after the failure of the JCPOA talks to make headway, and did you express support to those two about their efforts to target Iran's hardware for delivery of maybe nuclear bombs or for cooperating with Russia militarily? Also, just wanted to ask you a Palestinian question. You think you made any headway here? You said you had some ideas that were there. Would you like to share any of those with the press and the public?
Thank you. On Iran, we have Israel and the United States.
Watch this space. Your engagement by way of a like, share, and a subscribe will propel us at warp speed. To truthfully go where no news will have been going before.
Today's unemployment figures show the economy is moving in the right direction. The drop in unemployment is one more sign that the economy is strengthening.
This is the Muckrake, holding journalists accountable. Chrissie Mayr was met with a bit of opposition from her guests for a lack of empathy towards those affected by the recent earthquake in Turkiye.
I don't know what the other 3 quarters are.
I've never asked.
I don't know if you guys heard about this. I don't know if you're familiar with Revenge of the Cis, but this is Mersh and at Hippo Juice, also known as Royce. And they were making fun of, I guess, the earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, but they did it hilariously by putting it to Tetris music. And well, see for yourself.
Ooh, I don't
No, I'm not. No, what are you talking
Buildings collapsing from the earthquake's power.
And Virgie laughs.
Able to stand against.
Hey, this is what happens when you don't use union workers. Am I right? Huh?
You son of a...
No, I'm not. No. What are you
Buildings collapsing from the earthquake's power. Unable to stand against.
Hey, this is what happens when you don't use union workers. Am I?
Oh my God, they're so funny. But anyway, now Turkey is trying to cancel them. The whole country.
Really? The whole country of Turkey?
Turkophobia.
Oh my God.
Which is voluntarily translating all Turkophobia-related tweets, pictures, and videos. They're tweeting out, "What is wrong with you people?" at Hippo Juice Film and Mersh. And this has blown up quite a bit. This currently has 240.6K views.
It's too soon, man. It's too soon. There's what, 100,000 people died? It's cringe. Sorry, but it's cringe. It's cringe. It's too soon. They should have waited a little bit. I can see why.
A
people would be
week?
pissed. I don't know. I would wait longer than that. I mean, I'm telling you, over 100,000 people are dead, man. Oh, that's a lot of people.
People make fun of 9/11.
Yeah, but it's been 20 years.
Yeah, but this isn't going to be as well known.
Imagine you made fun of 9/11 a week out. I don't think
that's basically it. They're still saving people.
People
right
have done that. Stand-up comics were doing that, especially in New York City right after 9/11.
Did it go well?
Yeah. Yes.
It's. Oh. I've heard everyone who made fun got canceled at the time, but
the more funny you are, it's like you can pull off whatever it is. I think no topic is off limits. If it's more funny than it is brutal or harsh, then that's a win.
Well,
I mean, okay, so these guys, are they comedians? I don't know them, so
Mershes.
I think they are.
So Royce is not. I mean, and it was a collaborative thing, right? So I think Royce made the joke, and then we'll play the entire clip. But Royce made the joke, and then Virgie played Tetris, right?
Yeah.
So I think if we put in context, you go to a comedy show, you're gonna possibly get offended. It makes sense. If these guys are comedians, maybe it makes sense for them. It just out of context, you're like, oh, maybe I wouldn't have made that joke. Just in a regular day. So
yeah.
I can get both points in.
I think this is okay because they're not pointing out individuals. They're not zooming in on anyone's particular lifeless body or a baby being dragged out of the rubble. It's overall the building's just crashing. To me, that kind of was all right, they've taken a step back. They're not it's the situation as a whole. That you gotta admit, a lot of those buildings were shitty to all fall down
Yes, but that wasn't the only take they had, right?
that. If we have an earthquake here in the States, there's not dozens of buildings falling down.
Well, there's also not dozens of 6.9s or 7.9s happening and shit.
True.
The last time that happened.
Correct. Yeah, a 7.8 or 7.9 is not a a 5. I mean, I'm not empathizing because of that, but a 7.9 that's 2 4s. And I mean, I don't know. A lot of people probably have experienced a 4 in, let's say, a California, but a 7.9 is pretty high.
A freeway fell.
These are facts. They're numbers. You can.
We have the evidence. No one can dispute the evidence. We heard the evidence. We saw the evidence.
When it was a 6.8.
Yeah, you're right. Like, I don't know, actually, because are all your buildings like earthquake proof? I don't know. Here's the thing about humor, because some people use humor as like a defense mechanism when it comes to like really like hardcore stuff like this, and like some people that's how they deal. That's how they cope with humor. It's dark humor. That's a thing. But I can understand why some people wouldn't react well, and I can understand why some people would. It's just
this
really
is somebody
depends.
making fun of Mersh's dead mom. Your
Ooh,
mother
that's
should feel
not
my
cool.
dick inside of her throat. That's kind of
not
funny. Who is that weirdo? Yeah, this is interesting. I mean, I got a ton of blowback from the woke Asian community.
I will say, and you'll see in further clips, Mersh is probably the one who showed the most empathy of all.
After I did that kung flu fighting video during the pandemic. Pretty
See, I
fun.
thought that was hilarious.
Well, they thought it was too soon because people died from COVID. Blah, blah, blah.
See, that's the thing. People also got on you about the hooker thing too, right?
Oh yeah, they tried to get my gig at the Rochester Comedy Club canceled. They're like, ugh, because that whole me
Oh, the
sitting
stripper
at the
name.
Wars desk saying my stripper name is Sandy Hook. It's the weirdest things that
Right.
trigger people.
Exactly. It's just, it really depends on like the person and how they take humor. Like,
I just think it's okay. A joke can upset you. You can not like a joke, but that doesn't mean someone shouldn't be able to tell it. It's like, yeah, it could be
Agreed.
totally in poor taste. Enjoy it or don't, but that doesn't mean they should. You should be allowed to make jokes in poor taste.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Dark comedy is a thing. Like, people should be able to make whatever joke they want. I mean, some people won't laugh, but getting canceled over it is
Because you
really
know for a
stupid.
fucking fact, other countries are making fun of the United States right now for how trans and gay our fucking military has become.
Oh, yeah.
The balloons.
You know they're laughing
Definitely.
their asses off at how
Definitely.
weak this country seems now. You know they're laughing at Biden falling off his bike again.
All the time.
Definitely. I mean, can you blame them though with regards to
time.
Biden? I
No.
mean, your whole country's laughing at Biden.
We deserve to be made fun of, but like let's not pretend that other countries aren't making like horrific jokes at our expense. Like I'm sure people were making fun of 9/11 in other countries like the day it happened. So I don't know. I think
Well, I heard there was people dancing or something. I don't know what
I
nationality
heard,
they were.
right. I heard that that was like 9/11 on the day where like apparently like a bunch of Jewish people were like dancing and like laughing about it or something. And
yeah,
I heard people got really mad at that though. I don't remember that being taken very well. I remember that people were really upset.
Wow. Jake Willis, nothing is off limits. If you are going to censor people over a joke, then where does it stop? Is the same as the Eliza situation. Yeah, we're now at a point where a guy could be making a joke to his buddy at work, and if an uptight woman overhears it and has a problem, like she can actually report that to HR and get that guy in trouble, maybe fired. It's very fucking Chinese. It's
not good.
It's not good. Magic Squid, people are not responsible enough for the internet. What do you mean by that? More censorship?
Well, people don't act responsible enough in
Oh.
some people's eyes on the internet. That's what I think he's trying to say,
Well,
maybe.
The anonymity makes people more disinhibited to be proper.
Is that merged down?
That was well put. That was articulate.
Down there, dude, merch. It says Nightwave
That's
Radio.
a tough one that's a tough one for those guys. They're funny. They are funny. I think those guys are funny. Dave
mean, that's
Mersh
just
is a
funny,
comedian
but-
making fun of 9/11 on 9/12. Yeah, if you can get away with it, good for you. Like I like to hear a laugh or a groan as long as I'm getting some kind of noise coming out of you.
As long as you get a reaction, right?
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, he did get a reaction. I mean, those Turkish people are probably really upset with him right
Oh, when I pissed off the woke Asians, they were signing me up for like Asian dating sites.
What?
Like, I was getting
Really?
so many emails. Sometimes I still one sneaks through.
What do you
Oh
mean?
yeah, different fundraisers, because that's how people were trolling me. Like they hated me like for a good 6 weeks. They're like, my emails are public. They're just taking me and like signing me up for newsletters, like Asian newsletters,
Oh my
and just like random causes. And I'd be like, what the hell is this? Somebody just the other day signed me up
crazy.
for like a Filipino dating site, and I was getting all these matches of like old women, and I was like, what the fuck is this about?
Wow.
That is crazy.
I get the weirdest trolls.
Somebody said, what are those sites asking for a friend?
Oh my god! If comedy doesn't offend someone, is it really comedy? Exactly. I just don't think you should be canceled for a joke or sued.
I don't think you should either. I don't think you should either.
Oh.
Definitely.
I don't think really anybody should be
Here's
canceled.
the thing: is like you definitely reacted like negatively to that, like X-ray girl. So you're like, oh god, it's too soon. But there's probably some tragedy or some horrible thing that like would make both of you guys laugh instinctually right away.
Well, I
Like,
laughed at your bit, like I said.
What? Play what again? The video? Why?
Play it again.
I laughed at your bit.
We're gonna
The
play
Asian
it again
bit.
to see if it's like a cumulative effect. Let's see. Let's see if.
No, I'm not.
What is he looking at? What is he looking at?
The longer you watch, the longer it gets.
Unable to stand against.
Hey, this is what happens when you don't use union workers. Am I right?
I think it's funny. No,
I think the last part is funny.
Yeah,
The
I
union
pretend there's no
workers,
people
that
in-
was
when
funny.
when I laugh at this, I'm not thinking of people dying. I'm thinking of how shitty the buildings are.
Awkward silence.
Yeah.
Shitty buildings.
The union workers thing was funny.
At least in Syria, the teachers aren't coming out to their kids in kindergarten and shit like that.
Oh, no.
That's probably better.
Yeah, so this is I just want to see it in its entirety, the original, right? We had Virgie, off-screen personality. He was riffing off of Royce by adding that video. And there's some jokes.
Goodbye to their $14 million home in Key Largo. Yeah, great. That's great.
Correspondent Keir Simmons has the latest.
Oh, Jesus! That's because a long piece finally came in.
You're such a
The
fucking
long
asshole.
piece when it comes.
That was that L shape at the come right in. Yes.
See, documented there. First thing Mersh says is, "Hey, you're an a-hole." That joke, you're an a-hole, and then he joins that.
Such an asshole.
What?
Yeah, 2 times. You're such an a-hole.
Oh, that's fucking terrifying, though.
Oh fuck. Yeah, no, that's pretty bad.
I know what you're doing, you son of a
No, I'm not. No, what are you talking?
Oh no, actually, yeah. Royce played the music. He just acted as though he wasn't.
All buildings collapsing from the earthquake's power. Unable to stand against.
Hey, this is what happens when you don't use union workers. Am I right? Huh?
Why is there a New York construction worker there?
This is what happens when you grout your bricks with hummus.
That's what I.
Grout your bricks with hummus.
I call shawarma karma.
Shawarma karma. So those are, 2 ethnic jokes or religious jokes almost.
The morning light.
That's what it looked like before the earthquake. They're going to show you after here in a second.
Hey, ask me what Armenian genocide again.
Yeah, exactly. See, the idea that karma or nature balancing itself is the cause of the resulting earthquake is not unoffensive.
Go on, ask it again.
No, this is our town square. This is our original. This is a statue to commemorate the rubble that used to be here.
Yeah, they're calling the earthquake Armenia's revenge. You're right. That's exactly what it is, Pussy.
Oh, you've never been to the famous rubble statue in Turkey?
There's like 5.
Including devastation and wreckage. A toddler in
I feel bad now for the
Yeah,
Tetris thing.
maybe don't do
Now I
that.
feel bad for the Tetris thing.
Syria, bloody but conscious.
Yeah, and then at that point, Royce expresses like a distaste in his own actions, which probably spawned the inkling that outrage could be expressed. And it might have even fueled the pushback. Say it with your chest, Royce. Keep that same energy.
Pulled from the rubble, and other survivors taken from collapsed buildings, lucky to be alive. 3 huge tremors snapping streetlights and sending car alarms wailing.
I prefer tremors too.
I love when they did lucky to be alive. We'd be lucky to not have a 7.6 magnitude earthquake drop my house on top of me.
Yeah, be lucky if it won $100 on a scratcher. Yeah, that would be lucky. Oh wow, how lucky I am.
Imagine you're pulling bloody Royce out of rubble, and I'm like, hey, but you lived! Yay! It's a lucky day.
I have no legs.
You're like, everything I own is destroyed. Yes. It's not a lucky day.
Yeah.
The moments recorded on security camera footage.
You pull me out. Hey, you lucky day, you survived. Come on, let's get Chick-fil-A. It's Sunday.
Yeah,
oh no, it is a bad day, I guess.
I wish I were dead.
This is one of the region's worst quakes.
Ah, yes, this is the candle glass factory.
Yes. Oh, great, my hookah's only store. I just opened it up yesterday. Only hookahs, only glass hookahs.
You're the guy from Jim's Hookahs?
Can you imagine? This guy just started his China shop, right? Like, he literally just started this pottery shop, and like this was his first day, and he literally, like, the last moments were him just putting that last pot on perfectly, and then going like this, like licking his thumb and getting rid of a little bit of dust, and he's like, this is perfect. I can't wait to. God damn it.
He puts his last vase on the shelf and then puts up a comical sign that says "No bulls."
Yes.
And then he chuckles to himself, and then.
Oh fuck. And let me see here. Let's see. Greg Goromo said something, but I have to. Greg Goromo said Israel uses earthquake. It's super effective. Yes. That's very funny.
Turkey is stunned.
Oh, Turkey hurts itself in the confusion.
It's not looking great.
In decades, striking while people slept
No, not the
just
fish.
after 4 a.m. The quake hitting a huge area of southern Turkey.
I mean, I guess being a fish, you'd feel it the least.
That would suck, though, if your fish tank just smashed during it. You're like, fuck.
And northern Syria.
And then you're trying to run and grab like a glass to put water in, and you're wobbling around in the earthquake trying to pick up fish. Slipping on the water.
Area
Sounds
already
like the fucking plot of an indie game.
war torn with hundreds of
Wow,
refugees.
crazy that it only messed up Turkey and North Syria. That's so weird.
Is Israel okay?
The tremors felt as far as Beirut, Jerusalem, and Gaza. In
So we're
northern
also
Syria,
gonna need
they are
some
searching
money.
for survivors in opposition-held territory. Hospitals there already overwhelmed with the injured.
We need help. We need the international community to do something.
Siraj, is that you?
That's not Siraj. Wait, hold on. No, I don't think. It's his co-host.
To help us, to support us.
Turkey's President
Please
Erdogan.
go to local, support Habibi bros. We need the entire international community.
Look, the destruction is really... Oh, thank you, Penis Man 420 for the coffee.
Appreciate that, sir.
Make sure to like and subscribe.
Said rescue workers will be joined by troops to search for survivors, but they have a vast area to cover. Those searching calling for silence as they try and listen.
Chuck
for
Norris Gun
trap-
Club said there is an obvious giant fault line there. Yes, Chuck Norris Gun Club, but who put it there?
God?
I thought that was just like the border on the map.
Who
Yes,
wrote?
but what people's God?
Yeah.
Oh.
The Bible and the Torah are books of what? News? There you go.
Hey, the Bible and the Torah, they're both dull. Just combine them, call it the Bora. Am I right, boys?
Fucking hate you.
I'm more of a Talmud guy. It's more spicier.
It's Judaism after dark.
Yeah.
This rescuer asking someone trapped, "What color are you wearing? Are you
What color are you? It's really important.
Yes.
It's going to decide whether I save you.
wearing pink?" A frantic rush to find
What a
those
weird
caught
question
in
to
the
ask.
rubble.
Somebody ask you while you're trapped under rubble, what are you wearing?
Mm-hmm. What are you?
No, it's not. It's just
and
turkey.
then he replies, "Oh no, what are you wearing?"
I'll only rescue you if you're in a sexy little number.
The White House offering to provide
Yes,
any and
you
all
would better me to getting naked right now for the rescue attempt, yes.
assistance to Turkey, although the statement left out any reference to the US working directly with Syria.
And a second earthquake with a magnitude 7.6 has struck southern Turkey less than 12 hours after.
Oh my God, you Spurg! If you bring up the Surfside thing one more time, I'm gonna permanently block you. Sorry, I'm gonna. You know, here's. Geez.
So there we have it, and there's a third take on this last night on Mersha's Nightwave. He addressed it.
I'm talking the Buy Me a Coffee option. Click that Buy Me a Show very eventful this week. America becoming very much of quite a spicy meatball this week. Things are getting a little out of control. And you guys know me. I live for this kind of shit. I do. I downright fucking enjoy it. Colin pointing out this weekend on Twitter was fun. Royce and I had the entire nation of Turkey declare war on us, which is pretty dope. Sure. Royce got me this as a gift. We got in a little trouble this weekend with the nation of Turkey, and I could give you just an idea. Let me give you just a little taste of the titles here. I want to give you a little taste of what I've been dealing with. This is just the last 24 hours. This is my message request inbox. It's all Turkish people. It's all people calling me son of bitch. I fuck you mother. I fucking stick my dick your mother's ass and throat. I fucked you mother. I kill you. I fucking kill you. I fucking kill you. All fucking weekend. It has been fucking endless. I think they covered it on the Simpcast. Let me play the Simpcast. That way I'm not just, sitting here explaining myself and playing my own clip.
Some people, that's how they deal. That's how they cope with humor. It's dark humor. That's a thing, But I can understand why some people wouldn't react well, and I can understand why some people would. It's just
the best are the Turkish people that would say something to you, and then I would retweet it, and I would joke around, and they would think I was serious. Like, Turkish people, I learned this weekend, have no concept of humor. They have zero concept of humor. Forget about gallows humor or dark humor. They don't even know basic humor. They don't know a knock-knock joke. They don't get it. They don't understand humor. And then I would retweet, and I would make a joke, and then they would, respond seriously to my very not serious response. They'd be like, "Oh, fuck you mother," and then I would go, "My mom's dead, you asshole," and then they would all start adding me and being like, "Ha, your mom's dead," and then I would retweet it and go, "That's not funny. That's not fucking fun. That's not a funny joke. Somebody died." And then they would fucking start bombarding me with fucking replies. "But it is okay for you to make fun of our dead, but you make fun of your dead." I'm like, "You're not getting. I'm not offended. That's the joke is you're offended." And then I go, "My mom's dead," and you're like, "Good. I'm glad your mom's dead." And I'm like, "That's not funny, bro. We don't joke about death around here." It's Greasy Pan Ham. It's a deep insecurity about Turkish national identity. I know, because they live in a place occupied by 4 better empires that were there prior. That's why Turkey hates themselves. They hate themselves because, they had at least the Ottoman Empire before them, which was better than them. They had the Byzantine Empire, which was better than them. They had Rome when it was starting to get a little, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like everything that was before you was better than you now. So of course they're insecure.
I'm not sure I agree, but
I was a little proud of the big moment that I was proud of this. And I think that this didn't help as far as getting more people to be nice to us. I wanted to extend an olive branch. I wanted to make things up to the noble Turkish people. And this was late at night. Royce was asleep. I was really the one getting bombarded with the first wave because it was like overnight. It was morning in Turkey. Royce is dead asleep. I'm fucking battling these roaches all day. And then I went to sleep. Then Royce had to take over. And Royce woke up to even angrier Turks. Because of me.
yeah, so there we have it from a few perspectives. We're going to head into our next section. Watch this space. And be right back.
It is obvious to the most simple-minded that Loci is of an inferior breed.
The obvious visual evidence, Commissioner, is that he is of the same breed as yourself.
Are you blind, Commander Spock? Oh, look at me.
I thought you scientists were supposed to keep an open mind.
There's a difference between keeping an open mind and believing something because you want it to be true.
Your friend Spock is a logical man. I find your arguments strewn with gaping defects in logic.
Most illogical reaction. We demonstrated our superior weapons. They should have fled. You mean they should have respected us? Of course. Mr. Spock, respect is a rational process. Did it ever occur to you they might react emotionally? With anger?
Doctor, I'm not responsible for their unpredictability.
You do not think like the others. There are no colors to your patterns of logic. There's only black and white.
Logical, unemotional, completely pragmatic. And we poor, irrational humans whip them in a fair fight. Now you'll find yourself back among us illogical humans again, which I find eminently satisfactory, Doctor. For nowhere am I so desperately needed. Because she feels. I don't. All I know is logic.
Will you try to understand how we feel about our life here? About each other?
Emotions are alien to me.
I'm a scientist. You're gonna leave here without them? Run off on some wild goose chase halfway across the galaxy just because you found a discrepancy in a hydrogen cloud? Doctor, I'm chasing the captain, Lieutenant Uhura, and Ensign Chekhov, not some wild aquatic fowl.
Mr. Spock, you have a remarkably logical and analytical mind.
Thank you. I prefer the concrete, the graspable, the provable.
You'd make a splendid computer, Mr. Spock.
Anarchists call for the release of an imprisoned comrade in Italy, and this is one of the motivations by Italian citizens for protesting, another being something we covered yesterday. We'll play a clip here.
Italians gathered to protest President Zelensky's planned appearance at the closing ceremony of the Sanremo Song Festival. Demonstrators could be seen holding anti-war banners and placards against weapons deliveries to Ukraine as they called on authorities to stop politicizing cultural events and dragging Italy into the conflict. The Ukrainian president had planned to appear at the Sanremo Song Contest final and deliver a speech. The idea was immediately condemned by thousands of Italians who signed a petition against the initiative. Amid growing criticism of the amount of aid Italy has been giving to Ukraine, Italian construction workers face bankruptcy after the government cut back its so-called super bonus program. The 2-year-old tax break had given homeowners a 110% deduction on the cost of home renovations. Workers now fear they won't be able to take care of their families.
The government has scaled back the super bonus law, and now we don't know what to do. We find ourselves with many debts. We have workers and construction sites that we pay every month without any financial return. We are close to bankruptcy due to the Italian government. We're in a situation of total alarm. There are many people unemployed, and the government is not thinking about us. The politicians are thinking of something else. There are many companies that have already closed due to bankruptcy, and many more will soon close. Moreover, there will also be problems with the law for all these business people. Furthermore, there are people who have lost their jobs, people who have been fired, and all thanks to the Italian government, there will be people who will not have money for their families and children.
Meanwhile, government officials are cutting social benefits as the country joined France in agreeing to further arm Ukraine. According to the country's defense minister, Rome is fully committed to arming Kiev and will send its advanced missile defense system to the war zone. This adds to the 110 million euros Rome has already committed since the beginning of the conflict. The move caused anger among locals and raised questions about priorities as the country battles an economic crisis.
This is scandalous. Italy is a country full of debt. Many people are unemployed. Politicians say they have no money. People are increasingly poor, and the government is thinking of buying arms for Ukraine, which does not even represent us. It's a shame. They're financing a country that has nothing to do with us. I would leave tomorrow to go work for a Russian entrepreneur. I don't understand why Russia, which has always been a friend to us as a country, is being condemned, and instead what America is doing is not being condemned. America has invaded others, killed children, bombed countries, but now talks about how bad another nation has done. Why is Russia being condemned instead? Do we want to talk about what the Americans have done by striking countries in complete silence? And the Italian government is spending billions to buy weapons for Ukraine, money that could have been spent in a different way. They're betraying us as a people. They're thinking of a conflict that is not even ours. Europe should not have participated in all of this.
One more clip here. This is including a professor who put together a petition to have Zelensky not appear.
Professor at both the University of California in San Francisco and the University of Turin in Italy. Professor, it's great to have you on the program today. Now, you actually initiated a petition against allowing Ukrainian President Zelensky to speak at this popular Italian music festival. So what were your reasons for that?
Well, we are really fed up of propaganda. I think that the Western Bloc, NATO, and the U.S. in particular are feeding news to the Italian media system,
Let's
which is
unpack that for a second. Let's try and de-emotionalize this for a second. Let's try and intellectualize this for a second. Let's try and rationalize this for a second.
badly controlled, and they pretend that the Italians don't understand that the situation and the reality is much different and much more complex of what they are telling us. So, to have in Sanremo, which is perhaps the most important entertaining event in the year, with some 12 million people watching it, and most of the people watching Sanremo would be like, the middle Italy, so to say, people that are not prepared in their own, that are kind of are easily captured by propaganda. To hear Zelensky arriving there, depicting himself as an innocent victim of a brutal aggression, is something that talks to the heart of the people and might have a huge political impact in continuing in this crazy positioning of Italy in the global geopolitical arena. You have to understand that Italy has a constitution that came out after World War II, when we were liberated by both the Americans and the Russians. But more than 5,000 soldiers from the Soviet Union died during the resistance in Italy. So we have had a very long-lasting, strong relationship with the Russian people. And this sort of sudden change of political attitude due to the fact that Italy is not a sovereign country anymore, is something that is very, very disgusting to the eyes of people who maintain some critical approach. So I contacted some other intellectuals, some people that are figures of the cultural and political scene in Italy, and we just articulated a note saying, look, the situation is not the one that we are told every single day. The war didn't started 1 year ago. The war has been a process that has to be understood at least in a 15 years perspective, at least after taking into consideration what happened after the fall of the Soviet Union. This sort of narrative that simplifies, the good against the evil is a narrative that is extremely dangerous and is unconstitutional. In our constitution, there is written in Article 11 that Italy really despises the war, rejects the war in a proactive way as a means to solve international controversies. By taking side in a way that is suicidal from the economic perspective for us and is only in the interest of the United States is something that goes against our constitutional understanding and against, I believe, what most of the people think. So in a few days, we got almost 100,000 signatures on our invitation to go to Sanremo, and on Saturday there is going to be a massive demonstration in Sanremo. The point which is important is that the people are actually coming to Sanremo on a platform that is not really just only keep Zelensky out of the festival, which was just a trigger, but is a platform of give us some information that is a little bit more information and less propaganda.
Yeah, and far too many people have, stopped questioning why Zelensky is just appearing at award shows, at popular events, and being praised there, and really the precedent that it sets. Now, you have made a difference. I mean, despite the petition and the protest, the festival's organizers have said that, okay, they won't have Zelensky speak, but they will in a way, in the sense that they'll still let him read a text message, or send a text message, rather, to read at the event. So why, in your opinion, are they doing that? Is that some sort of a compromise, or what does it speak to?
There might be a little bit of both. Certainly, the popular resistance that was triggered by our invitation to go to Sanremo to show with our bodies the fact that there is an Italy that disagrees with this propaganda has created some problem to the public television. They are having its fact that our invitation to go to Sanremo to show with that was triggered by our invitation to go to Sanremo to show with our bodies the fact that there is an Italy that disagrees with this propaganda has created some problem to the public television. They are having issues now of running the show because we changed nominally we changed the government. We have a new government, and what the governments do in so-called Western democracies is that at least as soon as they arrive in power, they substitute the heads of the public televisions in order to control the media and the news. And this is a process that is going on at the Italian radio television right now. So I think that this was instrumentalized from both parties. And maybe what happened was that they tried a compromise. They went back to Zelensky. They said, well, why don't you just send a video or something like that? And he probably backed up a little bit. I don't know. They didn't find a deal. For us, is a partial victory. I don't believe, however, that the fact that an anchorman is reading his message is much different than the fact that he's reading it himself. He's still giving the voice to a country that is in war. And you see, in Italy, we have a law, an old law of 1990, which is a fundamental law that governs the military system in our country, that makes it illegal, clearly, to give arms to a country which is engaged in a war with another country, okay, with no exception. And Ukraine is not an ally of Italy. Ukraine, as you know, is not part of the NATO. We have no treaty of assistance with Ukraine, and so we are forbidden by law to give the arms to Ukraine. Draghi actually introduced an exception to that law in order to make it possible to give weapons to Zelensky, and that was for 2022. And Meloni has now made the exception in a way the rule. So now what we are going to do in Sanremo is to discuss the ways in which the people can take it to themselves by popular vote and try to introduce a referendum or something in order to make these exceptions to the rule of not giving guns to fighting sides becoming back something that is reasonable and legal in Italy. It's a long way. This is not. It is only the beginning, but certainly we are trying to set up a global anti-war movement that is not a Western propaganda, but it is something that is really genuinely against the law for the people and the law for an immediate ceasefire and for putting the people and the populations first.
Yeah, it sounds like the start of a very powerful movement, and we'll continue to follow it to see where it goes. Professor Ugo Mattei, thank you so much for your time and insight.
Time for some Israeli news government. From Italian to Israel. This is star.co.ke. Israel legalizes 9 West Bank settlements or settlement outposts. Palestinians see settlements as a major obstacle to a peace deal with Israel. In summary, in the first such move by the new government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the international community regards all settlements as illegal under international law, though Israel disputes this. The settlements are seen as illegal under international law, and the Israeli government has authorized 9 Jewish settlements in the West Bank, which were previously unauthorized outposts. It's the first such move by the new government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The international community regards all settlements as illegal under international law, though Israel disputes this. Palestinians see settlements as a major obstacle to a peace deal with Israel. They want all settlements and outposts to be removed from the West Bank and East Jerusalem, which they seek for a future Palestinian state. Israel has built about 140 settlements housing some 600,000 Jews since its occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem in the 1967 Middle East War.
Facts, they're numbers. You can
We have the evidence. No one can dispute the evidence. We heard the evidence. We saw the evidence.
Also on Sunday, Israeli authorities announced mass construction of new homes within established settlements. A statement from Mr. Netanyahu's office said a planning committee would convene in the coming days to approve new settlement homes. The far-right minister, Bezalel Smotrich, said on Twitter these would number 10,000. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, his administration said Sunday in an announcement Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas's administration said Sunday's announcement should be condemned and rejected. There's been no immediate comment from the U.S., but Ambassador Thomas Nides previously made clear Washington would oppose such moves. We want to keep a vision of a two-state solution alive. Netanyahu understands that we understand that massive settlement growth will not accomplish that goal, says Mr. Nides or Mr. Nides. Last month, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken criticized settlement activity in the occupied West Bank as an obstacle to peace. Here's another. Israel will lift all curbs on settlement construction, the minister says. Religious Zionist leader Bezalel Smotrich says Israeli-U.S. relations are based on mutual interests, but the administration understands current government must act on Israeli interests, knows well its position on settlements. Finance Minister that one's spelled Bezalel instead of, I've seen Bezalel over and over again. There's a T in there. I think that might be a misprint. Said Tuesday that the right-wing government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will lift all restrictions on settlement construction. Speaking during a press conference at the West Bank outpost of Givat Harel, one of the 9 the government said it will legalize, Smotrich expressed his commitment to continue building settlements and to lift restrictions on construction there. The real answer to terror is to continue to build, to continue to set roots in the land of Israel.
Your inconsistencies are glaringly obvious. What is this nothing you talk about?
This is what we as a government, as a state, as a nation must do. The settlement enterprise thrives thanks to the pioneers who sustained it for many years with great love, with great determination, with great consistency and efficiency. We've now approved 10 settlements, and there's a general clause in the decision that allows us to advance more if need be. My coalition partners understand that this is a logical move.
The whole notion of logic.
Yep. Let's let me load up some data otherwise, see if there's anything else out there. This is real time. It's not exactly easy to search for Palestine news right now because of East Palestine in Ohio. I think it's just a distraction, though. Here's one. Israel's home demolitions, a war on nerves for Palestinians. This is Al Jazeera. East Jerusalem residents know that suspended demolition orders remain in force and may be executed at any moment. Silwan occupied East Jerusalem. Sabah Bader, 57, spent his life savings from working as a chef on an apartment she could finally call her own, hoping for some sense of security for herself and her son. But since she moved into a 13-unit building in the Palestinian neighborhood of Silwan, south of the Old City in East Jerusalem, occupied East Jerusalem, 8 years ago, the single mother's life has been far from secure. Bader and the nearly 100 other Palestinians living in the same building have had the threat of demolition and forced displacement by Israeli authorities constantly hanging over them. Residents of the 13-unit building, at least half of whom are minors, received a final Israeli demolition order on February 5th under the pretext that their building lacks a permit. Days later, following international pressure, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced the demolition would be indefinite. While the building's removal was put off, the demolition order remains in force and may be executed at any moment. Even if they demolish this building, I'll put up a tent and stay here. I'm not better than any of the people living in refugee camps. I'll become exactly like them, Bader told Al Jazeera from her home. Under the new right-wing Israeli government, sworn in late last year, Israeli officials have been fast-tracking the demolition of Israeli-designated illegal Palestinian homes in occupied East Jerusalem, including in the neighborhoods of Silwan, Jabal al-Mukaber, and Hizma. These Israeli policies mean that at least one-third of all Palestinian homes in occupied East Jerusalem lack an Israeli-issued building permit, with more than 100,000 residents at risk of forced displacement, according to United Nations figures. Close to 1,000 other Palestinians are facing forced eviction from their homes in cases filed against them by Israeli settler groups, many with support from the Israeli government. On a real-time check for one more. Here's one regarding the first one we read. Zionist regime authorizes non-illegal West Bank settlements. Extremist regime led by Benjamin Netanyahu continues to implement oppressive policies that cause untold misery to the native Palestinians. This is Islam21c.com. Palestinian protests against illegal Zionist occupation in the West Bank. On Sunday, the so-called Security Cabinet of the Zionist entity announced that it would be approving 9 illegal West Bank settlements with a view to strengthening the regions. For decades, settlement building in the occupied West Bank has been internationally deemed unlawful. The move is the latest step taken by one of the most hardline ultranationalist Israel regimes to ever hold office. Since the unacceptable formation of the entity in 1948, the Zionist entity continues to push false narrative. In a statement released over the weekend, the disastrous move was billed as a reaction to the murderous terrorist attacks in Jerusalem. The statement added that the Security Cabinet decided unanimously to authorize 9 communities in Judea and Samaria, utilizing the name favored by the Israeli regime when describing the West Bank. Israeli leader Benjamin Netanyahu's official also claimed in the statement, or office also claimed in the statement, these communities have existed for many years, some have existed for decades. The Civil Administration Higher Planning Committee will be convened in the coming days to approve the construction of new residential units in existing communities in Judea and Samaria. West Bank is a part of Palestine. The West Bank is home to just shy of 3 million Palestinians, with around 500,000 Israeli citizens having illegally located themselves in Palestinian territory. For many years, the Zionist entity has either tacitly given approval of such, and I'll read that one again because, well, actually, no, let's continue. For many years, the Zionist entity has either tacitly given approval of such encroachment of Palestinian land or actively promoted buildings, works, and the relocation of Israel's citizens in order to displace the native Palestinians. While the despotic Israeli regime continues to unfairly accuse the Palestinians of engaging in terror attacks and other such incidents, it conveniently glosses over the fact that it's occupied and oppressed the native population for over 75 years. The latest statement and step by the Zionist entity proves the extent to which it's willing to go in order to subjugate the Palestinians of their homeland. All talk, no action. Following Sunday's announcement by the Zionist regime, the U.S. responded by saying it was deeply troubled. The Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, suggested that the Zionist entity's biggest international donor was against the move. On Monday, Blinken outlandishly said, "We strongly oppose such unilateral measures which exacerbate tensions and undermine the prospects for a negotiated two-state solution." Despite the official verbal response, there's no obvious indication as to whether there will be any punitive measures taken against the entity. The same can be argued for Saudi Arabia, whose foreign minister, Prince Faisal bin Farhan, said during a joint news conference with the European Union's foreign policy chief, Joseph Borrell. That's all. Well, that was a good one, too. Let's just check for another. Yeah, I appreciate the language in that one. You know, something related to a Zionist. What was it? It was like a Zionist at the beginning, not an entity. Yeah, it was a Zionist entity. The Zionist entity. I do like that. Also, the clarifying Judea and Samaria and West Bank. That's a really pertinent article. Written from a perspective that's understandable, I'd say. Yeah, that one was from 40 minutes ago. Let's see what else we have. Okay, and the last thing we're going to do so I had an idea to extend our Chat GPT segment by incorporating chats from some of the videos we've been watching. So comments, chats. Let's see. This one is on the RT Italian protest against Zelensky's appearance at San Remo Festival occurrence. Let's see what we have here. The people have spoken. This is Paul Haler, 3140. One day ago. The people have spoken. True. They need to get the Italian military to get involved. I don't know. The Italian military might support the right. You know, you never know. It's fascists. True word. We're feeling it in England as well. We, the people, paying for war at the pump and on food. Giles Dillon. Oh, Dillion. He might be Jamaican or from some island. We the people paying f. That's really the one that gave it away, the f instead of for f. Yeah, same thing in Poland. Ariel Spoko. This is an amazing chat, by the way. Good for them. Zelensky has to go. Let's see what the responses are. This is Karen Steinman. She says Zelensky has to go. She tells us that's good for them, not good for us. Very interesting. The begging oligarch. Italians should express how they really feel with letters addressed to President Sergio Mattarella and American President Joe Sleepy Biden at the White House. He's a professional troll. Yeah, I like this guy. What is it? GACTVDX? Let's see what else we have here. Oh, let's see what's happening in Mersh's comments. Oh, we would do it in chat. I mean, that would be fun too, but I think comments is probably more salient. Expect more and more disasters as HR departments gut institutions of professionals to make room for diversity hires. No gun zone, just sitting in barrel zones. They all have, I guess because it's a very long video, they all have timestamps. Fallout IRL. What are we doing here, boys? Did Sean Oliver ever hear a bad thing about Lanny Puffo? Morning, friends. I can't believe you think the PCR tests are accurate. Well, Mersh, thanks for the laugh. There are worse ways to die than the inevitable cancer and bone disorders. It'll just be a family tradition now, starting with my dad dying of pancreatic. I just thought with all the Captain Planet, Animal Planet, and recycling propaganda, my generation would have been better about not releasing a chemical that will inflict generations of people. We tried. I'll get back to finding that funny at some point, as in reference to the East Palestine, Ohio issue. Dude, the Ottomans are the Turks. Yes, the Ottomans are the Turks. Yep, the Spurgbergs are exhausting. The Two Boomer podcasts do have a point about the feminization of society, but they do it so boring and predictable. We made Mark Harley, as in we watched 2 Lazy Tries videos. You seem very sensitive, man, blocking people that donate. LOL. Yeah, only a highly sensitive person would make this comment. It's truth. Why should anyone take a sheet for small change? Be a man and super chat 100 to 200 and he'll let you. Or are you poor? LOL, cry harder. And a couple more. Oh my gosh, Simcast. Let's see. I mean, these are just too wild and like particular, you know. Let's see what they say in Richard Medhurst's Nord Stream video. What are the comments? Unforgivable what happens with Syria. All people suffering from a natural disaster deserve the same help, whether the quote-unquote West sanctions their countries or not. It's just humane not to do so. Thank you for covering this, Richard. You're a real gem here. Richard John McDougan confirms the Seymour Hersh report with a testimony from his own whistleblower. I don't know about you guys, but when I see a YouTube video from Richard that's an hour or more long, I know it's going to be so juicy. I love when things are put into context and in depth, not just reframed and blow things out of proportion like the mass media. So thanks. It's the era for independent journalists to rise. Great comment. Who's that? South 1328. This is from The Revolution Continues, Block 6182. Never has a truer comment been made. America's an oil company with an army. In this case, the U.S. is an oil company with a Navy, Air Force, and some good friends in Norway. Thank you for covering this story, Richard. I hope we're not at war soon. But if I can't speak with you again, I want to thank you and others for sharing the truth with so many. Power to the people. He writes like a boomer. Bobo Flavor Anas. He's confirming what we already suspected. U.S. is said, given an indication of capabilities, was specific about the pipeline. I'm not surprised at all, Richard. Thank you for your hard work. I really appreciate you. Block Rock 44. Thanks for letting us know, Richard. And not heard about this. And I feel that news likely wouldn't really get around easily if I left it to MSM. All such horrible stuff. Richard, the Anglo-Saxon Guard worked together with the Norwegians to compose a signal, and they helped to build the remote control buoy together with the Norwegians. You don't need an expert to realize who was responsible. I knew from day one. That's Dim Sum Den 5745. From Jason Delvo 3036. Richard, are you coming to DC on February 19th for Rage Against the War Machine? You should be there. You're one of the great voices against imperialism. That's a great comment. Fate whispers to the warrior, you cannot withstand the storm. The warriors whisper back, I am the storm. Love your work, Richard. Thank you for my du'as for your mashallah. La ilaha illallah. Richard, February 19th. Yes, we need you here. We need you there, brother. It would be an honor. Your best work ever, Richard. You've said it all. Tierra Caliente 3914. In the Crimea bridge attack, they used the new technology drones. So, as can be seen in the water before explosions. They dropped the 3 buildings on the 11th of September 2001. Do you honestly think they won't, or they can't blow up a pipe? Yeah. Okay, we got one more. Is this another Richard? Yeah, this is another Richard one. So it should be some of the same sentiments, but particularly about Pepe Escobar guesting on Richard's show. Thanks a million to both these real investigative journalists. Seymour Hersh's story was not hard to find, but its journalistic integrity and strength to publish the truth is such a sensitive issue. Russian newspaper Moskovich Kosmolets was the first newspaper who wrote about the U.S.-Norway sabotage. Russian naval officer Vladimir Gundarov mentioned also this theory early. A few months ago, the American YouTuber John Mark Dugan received a tip from a military officer who attended Baltops 22, and he gave even more details about what happened, the equipment used, etc. Mr. Dugan, I said Duggan before, Mr. Dugan has made 2 videos about the information verifying Mr. Hirsch's story. It's a childish and unprofessional. The U.S. and Norway does not acknowledge the facts, but instead call Seymour Hersh's story fabrication and nonsense. Lieutenant Colonel Per Espen Strand Lee, press spokesman, Norway Defensive Department and Norwegian Defense Ministry, the story was nonsense. The sabotages must have been approved by Rear Admiral Nils Andreas Stensons, head of Norwegian military intelligence, and got a political green light from Prime Minister Jonas Gahr Store. The cat is now out of the box, and U.S. Norway should just tell the truth. They viewed the sabotage as necessary to stop Russian gas supplies to Europe. I'm Russian, that had been working with Norwegians in the oil and gas sector for more than 15 plus years, and I should admit that they were the easiest and pretty much always full of sense customers to deal with compared to Brits, Germans, Americans, and other Europeans. It's really hard to accept, not to believe, but exactly to accept that seemingly independent nation who built its industry from scratch and knows how hard it is could have done anything like that. I guess that's intuitions or my questions to the Norwegian public. How do you define this action? In my understanding, it's an act of terrorism. Do you approve it? Would you be doing anything about it? The USA is committing international terrorism once again, and with no accountability makes my blood boil. Pepe is awesome. He won't let you finish a sentence, though. Great work as always. Never forget what the U.S. has done all over the world since World War II. I never doubted for a moment as to where the perpetrators, including Norway and M16 and possibly Poland, all coordinated from the U.S. I believe the basic idea plan or plans of how to blow up Nord Stream started long before 2021 and probably even dated before 2010 when Nord Stream 1 was on the drawing board. Even at that time, U.S. heavily sanctioned contractors supplying militaries for the pipeline. Of course, the precise operational details of the plan could not be established until it was ready to put it into execution and all the necessary field conditions were put in place. Delta squared 7777 is well read. And I think we'll end it there. So I think the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that I'm communicating. And open a channel here. Just a second. All right, great. Just check the stream, and that last portion was with a blank screen as I was going through the chats, but the audio was still there, so I'm going to keep that in. And at this point, let's open that channel. And on my mark.
Beam me up, Mr. Spock. Beam me up. Lock on transporters. Beam us up. Beam us up. Quickly. Beam us up home. Beam us up.
Prepare to beam us up, Mr. Scott. Beam us up, Mr. Scott.
Prepare to beam us up. Mr. Scott, prepare to beam us up. Have Scotty beam us up. Beam us up. Beam us up. Scotty, beam us up fast. Stand by to beam us up. Scotty, beam me up.
Beam me up.
Beam us up now!
Stand by to beam us up. No need to beam me up, sir. The situation is under control.